What do you think is the best joke on the internet? Why do scuba divers fall out of the boat backwards? Because if they fell forward, they'd still be in the boat. What's the main difference between an oral thermometer and a rectal thermometer? The taste. A man was driving down the road and his car breaks down near a monastery. He goes to the monastery, knocks on the door and says, "My car broke down. Do you think I could stay the night?" The monks graciously accept him, feed him his dinner, and even fix his car. As the man tries to fall asleep, he hears a strange sound. A sound unlike anything he's ever heard before. The sirens that nearly seduced Odysseus into crashing his ship comes to mind. He doesn't sleep that night. He tosses and turns, trying to figure out what could possibly be making such a seductive sound. The next morning, he asks the monk what the sound was, but they say, "We can't tell you. You're not a monk." Distraught, the man is forced to leave. Years later, after never being able to forget the sound, the man goes back to the monastery and pleads for the answer again. The monks reply, "We can't tell you, you're not a monk." The man says, "If the only way I can find out what's making the beautiful sound is to become a monk, then please make me a monk." The monks reply, "You must travel the earth and tell us how many blades of grass there are and the exact number of grains of sand. When you find these answers, you will have become a monk." The man sets about his task. After years of searching, he returns as a grey-haired old man and knocks on the door of the monastery. A monk answers. He's taken before a gathering of all the monks. "In my quest to find what makes that beautiful sound, I traveled the earth and found what you asked for. By design, the world is in a state of perpetual change. Only God knows what you ask. All a man can know is himself, and only then if he is honest and reflective and willing to strip away self-deception." The monk replies, "Congratulations, you've become a monk. We shall now show you the way to the mystery of the secret sound." The monks lead the man to a wooden door, where the head monk says, "The sound is beyond that door." The monks give him the key and he opens the door. Behind the wooden door is another door made of stone. The man is given the key to the stone door and he opens it, only to find a door made of ruby. And so it went that he needed keys to doors of emerald, pearl, and diamond. Finally, they came to a door made of solid gold. The sound had become very clear and definite. The monk says, "This is the last key to the last door." The man is apprehensive. His life's wish is behind that door. With trembling hands, he unlocks the door, turns the knob, and slowly pushes the door open. Falling to his knees, he's utterly amazed to discover the source of that haunting and seductive sound. "But of course I can't tell you what it is because you're not a monk." I think I hate you for submitting this. Well done on making me narrate that on a rough morning, you absolute sack of steaming turd. My disappointment is immeasurable and my day is ruined. I promise I'll be mostly sticking to much shorter jokes from now, folks. Why don't you ever see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it. What does a robot do during a one-night stand? He nuts and bolts. Two whales walk into a bar. The bartender asks, "What can I get for you two?" One whale goes, The second whale says, "I'll go home, Frank, you're drunk." Two men are sitting at a bar at the top of the Empire State Building when the first man turns to the other and says, "You know, last week I discovered that if you jump from the top of this building, the winds around the building are so intense that by the time you fall to the 10th floor, they'll carry you around the building and back into a window." The bartender just shakes his head in disapproval while wiping the bar. The second guy says, "What are you, nuts? There's no way that could happen." "No, it's true," the first man says. "Let me prove it to you." He gets up from the bar, jumps over the balcony, and plummets towards the street below. As he nears the 10th floor, the high winds whip him around the building and back into the 10th floor window, and he takes the elevator back up to the bar. He meets the second man, who looks quite astonished. "You know, I saw that with my own eyes, but that must have been a one-time fluke." "No, I'll prove it again," says the first man as he just automatically leaps over the railing. Just as he's hurtling towards the street, the 10th floor wind gently carries him around the building and into the window. Once upstairs, he urges his fellow drinker to try it. "Ah, well, why not?" the second guy says. "It works, I'll try it." He jumps over the balcony, plunges downward, passes the 11th, 10th, 9th, 8th floors, and hits the sidewalk with a splat. Back upstairs, the bartender turns to the other drinker and says, "You know, Superman, you're a real jerk when you're drunk." I think this is one of my favorites. "Doctor, will I be okay?" "I don't know, Mercury is in Uranus right now." "I don't do astronomy, doctor." "Me neither, my thermometer just broke." Did you hear about the cheese factory in France that exploded? Debris was everywhere. Oh, here's a classic. So a grandpa takes his grandson out fishing. The grandpa pulls out a smoke and lights it. The kid asks, "Hey grandpa, can I have one?" Grandpa says, "Does your Johnson touch your butt, kid?" And the kid says, "Well, no." And grandpa says, "There's your answer, you're too young." Then grandpa pulls out some whiskey and takes a few pulls of the bottle. The kid asks, "Hey, could I have a drink of that, grandpa?" Grandpa again asks, "Does your eggplant touch your butt?" "Well, no, it doesn't," says the kid. Grandpa says, "Well, there's your answer." So the kid pulls out some cookies and starts snacking away on them, and grandpa says, "Oh, gee, kiddo, those cookies look pretty good. Could I have one?" So the kid says, "Does your Johnson touch your butt, grandpa?" And grandpa says, "Why, yes, it does." And the kid says, "Good, then you can go F yourself then." I was in the office today and the cleaning lady asked if I wanted to smoke Mary J with her after work. I turned her down. I don't really like high-maintenance women. Two nuns were sitting on a park bench when an undressed man runs by. One of the nuns had a stroke, but the other one couldn't reach. Four older gents who were college buddies met for dinner for the first time in 20 years. After ordering, one of the men got up to use the bathroom. One of the men boasted about his son. "My son's so successful. He started at the bottom, valeting cars, worked and saved money, and he just started his second dealership. For his friend's birthday, he bought him a Maserati." All the men clapped and nodded. The next man said about his son, "My son's so smart, he started as a junior aircraft technician at a small charter, pulled himself through engineering, and he has his own private jet company with millions in revenue. For a friend's birthday, he bought his friend a twin-engine turboprop." Again, all of the men wiped tears from their eyes. The third man said about his son, "My son is a hard worker. He started mowing lawns and went into trades. He's the president of a company that builds subdivisions. For his buddy's birthday, he gave his friend a new house." All the men clapped and sat back enjoying their son's accomplishments. The fourth man came back, sat down, and asked why they were crying. After finding out, he said, "Yeah, you wouldn't believe it, but my son actually takes his clothes off for money, and his birthday was last month, and 3 of his clients gifted him a car, a plane, and a house." A New York stockbroker finally cashed in and decided to retire, so he bought a ranch in Montana. On day 1, he's working on the fence, and in a cloud of dust down the road comes a pickup truck, and it pulls up beside him. Out jumps a big strapping ranch cowboy. "Howdy, partner. I'm your nearest neighbor from down the road a piece. I came by to say hello and invite you to a party I'm having Saturday night." "Well, that's very nice of you. I'd be glad to attend," says the stockbroker. The big cowboy cocks his hat and says, "Well, I should tell you there's going to be some drinking." The stockbroker says, "Well, now I've been known to enjoy a good martini or two." The cowboy then says, "Okay, well, I should warn you there might be some fighting." This takes the stockbroker back a bit, but he replies, "Well, I'm from New York. I've seen my share of fights." "Okay then," says the cowboy as he's getting back into the truck. "One more thing. There's going to be some love-making too." The stockbroker replies, Well, okay. Say, what should I wear?" The cowboy says, "Oh heck, it don't matter. It's just going to be you and me." A Buddhist walks up to a hot dog vendor and says, "Make me one with everything." Bonus for philosophy nerds. Descartes walks into a bar. The bartender says, "Hey, Descartes, I just got this new import beer in. You want to try it?" Descartes says, I think not." And he vanishes into thin air. That one is very, very good. I don't think everyone watching this channel will get it, but it's good. Or maybe this comment will make those of you who didn't get it, you can Google Descartes and laugh afterwards. We strive for education here on Am I the Genius, as ever. Stalin is sitting at his desk, busy with paperwork, when his assistant bursts into the room and says, "Comrade Stalin, there's a clairvoyant here that wants to see you. He claims he can see the future." "Send him to Gulag," says Stalin. "If he could see the future, he wouldn't have come here." Dave knows everyone there is to know. Dave was bragging to his boss one day. "You know, I know everyone there is to know. Just name someone, anyone, and I'll know them." Tired of his boasting, his boss called his bluff. "Okay, Dave, how about Tom Cruise?" "No dramas, boss. Tom and I are old friends, and I can prove it." So Dave and his boss fly out to Hollywood and knock on Tom Cruise's door. Tom Cruise shouts, "Dave, what's happening? Great to see ya. Come on in for a beer." Although impressed, Dave's boss is still skeptical. After they leave Cruise's house, he says that he thinks Dave knowing Cruise was just lucky. No, just name anyone else," Dave says. "President Obama," his boss quickly retorts. "Yep," Dave says. "Old buddies, let's fly out to Washington," and off they go. At the White House, Obama spots Dave on the tour and motions him and his boss over, saying, "Dave, what a surprise. I was just on my way to a meeting, but you and your friend come on in and let's have a cup of coffee first and catch up." Well, the boss was very shaken by now, but still not totally convinced. After they leave the White House grounds, he expresses his doubts to Dave, who again implores him to name anyone else. "The Pope," says his boss. "Sure," says Dave. "My folks are from Germany and I've known the Pope a long time." So they fly off to Rome. Dave and his boss are assembled with the masses in Vatican Square when Dave says, "This'll never work. I can't catch the Pope's eye among all these people. Tell you what, I know all the guards, so let me just go upstairs and I'll come out on the balcony with the Pope." And he disappears into the crowd headed towards the Vatican. Sure enough, half an hour later, Dave emerges with the Pope on the balcony. But by the time Dave returns, he finds out his boss has had a heart attack and is surrounded by paramedics. Working his way to his boss's side, Dave asks him, "What happened?" His boss looks up and says, "I was doing fine until you and the Pope came out on the balcony and the man next to me said, 'Who the frick's that on the balcony with Dave?'" You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. An old man and his grandson were spending some quality time together on a rainy Sunday. They'd been planning on playing football outside, but it had started raining at 8 a.m., and it was now 5 p.m. with no end in sight. So, as they were sitting inside in front of a big bay window, and Grandpa is looking out at it raining cats and dogs, says, "Wow, it's been raining all day. That's a lot of rain." And the grandson says, "Yeah, tell me something I don't know, Grandpa." So the grandfather replies, "Your grandmother's butt can take my whole fist." I mixed up the words jacuzzi and yakuza, and now I'm in hot water with the Japanese mafia. A man goes to a funeral. He asks the widow if he could say a word. He goes to the front and says, "Plethora," and sits back down. The widow leans over and whispers, "Thanks, that means a lot." Another man approaches. He'd been a close companion of the deceased. He too asks the widow if he might speak and heads to the front. "Bargain," he says. The widow pats his arm. "That means a great deal." A man comes up and asks to say a few words. The widow gives him the okay. He steps up to the mic and says, with confidence, "Water pit." The widow gives him a small smile. "Thanks, I know you mean well." Two guys are walking down the street when they see a dog licking his pecker. One guy says, "Oh, I wish I could do that." The other one replies, "Well, maybe just try petting him first." A penguin is on a long-deserved vacation from the zoo. He decides to take a road trip out west where his car breaks down. Luckily, it's right in front of a mechanic in town. He drops the car off and tells the mechanic he's going to get some lunch. It's a really hot day, so after eating, he stops by the ice cream shop for a little treat. Walking back to his car, the mechanic tells the penguin, "It looks like he blew a seal." The penguin laughs. "Oh no," he said as he wipes his mouth, "that's just ice cream." I had a song stuck in my head the other day and kept singing it out loud. My wife finally broke down and screamed, "Will you please stop singing Wonderwall?" I said, "Maybe." "I hear you, dude. I was humming the chorus to I'm a Believer around the house the other day when my wife suddenly screamed at me to knock it off. This was really out of character for her, so I just assumed she was joking. Then I saw her face." People are shocked when they find out what a terrible electrician I am. A proctologist walks into a bank. He needs to sign a document. He tries to sign, but he pulls a thermometer out of his shirt pocket. Oh crap, some butthole has my pen. "Dad, the trash man's here." "Tell him we don't need any." A man sat down at a bar and told the bartender, "I bet you $300 that I can pee into the cup all the way over there on the other side of the bar and not miss a single drop." The bartender said, "There is no way you can do that. Sure, I'll bet you $300. The man then begins to undo his pants and lets it rip. He starts peeing all over the bar, spraying on the bottles and the bartender, not making a single drip in the cup. The bartender starts smiling and laughing and says, "That's it, you owe me $300. The man then gets up and walks over to the pool table and starts laughing and shaking hands with the men standing there. He walks back to the bar, sits down and starts laughing at the bartender and hands him $300. The bartender asks, "Why are you so happy? You just lost the bet." The man said, "I'm laughing because I bet those guys over there $1,000 that I could pee all over you and your bar, and you'd still be laughing when I was done." Classic sort of bar joke. I've got to say though, that out of all the jokes I've read out, I've only read the Buddhist requesting to be made one with everything joke before. So color me impressed at how many original ones we've had. However, I can already see that at least one joke from earlier in my life is coming up, so here we go. What did the sign on the door of the brothel say? "Beat it, we're closed." I went to the zoo and saw a baguette in a cage. I asked the zookeeper about it and he told me it was bred in captivity. One day, 3 people were stuck on an island with cannibals. The cannibals said, "If you do what we say, we won't kill you." So the 3 people followed the orders of the cannibals. They said, "Go into the forest and pick 10 fruits of the first fruit you see." So the first person came back out of the forest with 10 apples. The cannibals said, "If you put the 10 apples up your butt without making a facial expression, we'll let you live." The person then made a facial expression after the second apple, so they killed him. The second person came back out of the forest with 10 cherries. The cannibals said, "Put the cherries up your butt without making a facial expression." The person then started laughing at the 10th cherry, so they killed him. In heaven, the person with apples asked the person with cherries, "Why did you start laughing?" The person replied, "Oh, I saw the third person coming out with pineapples." "Doc, you've got to help me. I can't stop singing What's New Pussycat." "Ah, that sounds like Tom Jones syndrome. Is it common?" "It's not unusual." What did Cinderella say when she got to the ball? I told that to my family when I was like 11. It went over well. Why did the blind man fall into the well? He couldn't see that well. This guy sees a sign, "Talking dog, $5." He walks up and asks the man, "Does the dog really talk?" The owner says, "Yup." "Bullcrap." The dog pipes in, "Oh, it's true, I can speak." "Holy crap," says the first guy. "Yes, I started out in the circus as a sideshow until the CIA found me. They recruited me as a spy. Nobody suspects the dog in the room is listening to state secrets. After 2 tours, I retired here in the country to live out my days." My God, man, that's the most astounding thing I've ever heard. So why the hell are you only selling him for $5? The owner says, "Because that dog is a liar. He didn't do any of that crap." An English job foreman is hiring, and an Irishman soon appears requesting a job. Laughing, the foreman responds, "You? Hire you? I doubt you know the difference between a girder and a joist." After a moment of pondering, the Irishman responds, "Well, one of them fellows wrote Faust and the other wrote Ulysses." Mother Superior is sitting in the convent one night when she hears a knock at the door. She looks out at the peephole and, seeing no one, very cautiously opens the door. She's stunned to find 2 leprechauns standing meekly, hats in hand, on the steps of the nunnery. "My sons, how can I help you this fine evening?" "Well, Mother, have you any leprechaun nuns at this convent?" "I'm sorry, my son. We've no leprechaun nuns here." "Well, Mother, do you know of any leprechaun nuns anywhere?" "No, my son. I don't know of any in all of Ireland. And if there's none here, then there can't be any leprechaun nuns in the whole church." At this, the first leprechaun whips around, jabbing his finger at his companion. "I told you you've been doing the deed with a penguin." The divorce court judge says to Mickey, "Now let me get this straight, Mr. Mouse. You want a divorce from your wife Minnie because she's crazy." And Mickey says, "No, I never said she was crazy. I said she was effing goofy. Oh-ho!" 3 men went to hell and they stood before the devil. The devil asked the first man, "What did you do for a living?" The man answered, "I was a lumberjack." The devil said, "Then we will chop your manhood off." He turned to the second man, asking the same question he asked the first. "I was a fireman," said the second man. "Then we will burn your manhood off," said the devil. He turned to the third man, asking the same question he asked the other 2. The third man thought about it and finally answered the devil, "I was a lollipop salesman." A pair of hunters from Illinois are out in the woods. Whilst descending a hill, one of them suddenly cries out in pain and falls to the bottom, clutching his chest as he hits the ground. The other hunter rushes to his side as his friend noticeably stops breathing. Pulling out his phone, he quickly dials 911. After a few rings, the dispatcher picks up. 911, what's your emergency? The hunter replies, "I'm out near Route 51. My friend has had a heart attack. I think he's dead. What do I do?" The dispatcher replies, "It's okay, sir. Can you calm down and make sure that he's dead?" The hunter replies, "Well, okay." The dispatcher hears some rustling over the phone, followed by the resounding boom of a 12-gauge. The hunter comes back on the line, saying, "Okay, now what?" This joke is courtesy of my stepfather and his old drinking buddy, the men of many laughs. What do you get if you insert human DNA into a goat? You get kicked out of the petting zoo. What did the fish say when it hit the wall? Damn. That's my uncle's only joke. 2 windmills are standing in a field when one of them asks, "What's your favorite kind of music?" The other one says, "I'm a big metal fan." There was this one guy who got a job at the pickle factory. He came home from his first day and his wife asked him how it was. He said it was great, but he couldn't stop watching the pickle slicer. He said he knew it was wrong, but he couldn't stop thinking about putting his trouser snake into the pickle slicer. His wife thought that was a little bit weird. Time went on, but the woman's husband only became more withdrawn. He was obsessed. Finally, she just confronted him. Look, I can tell this thing is eating you alive. Ignoring it isn't working. You just have to get this out of your system. Her husband croaked out, Really? Really? She exclaimed. I want you to stay late after work after everyone else has left. Make some kind of excuse, and then when there's nobody else around, just go ahead and put it in the pickle slicer. Then you'll finally be able to move on. He silently nodded his head, thanked her, and left for work. All day, she was thinking about her husband and the difficult time he must be having. Finally, he arrived home a little later than usual. He slammed his lunch down on the kitchen table. Well, I finally did it. I put it in the pickle slicer. Really? Asked his wife. Yes, I was thinking about it all day. Then, like you said, I stayed after quitting time and people had left. But my boss came back into the factory and caught me with my member in the pickle slicer. Oh no! She exclaimed. I got fired. He responded mildly. I can see why he'd be upset, but that seems a little severe. What happened to the pickle slicer? Asked his wife. Oh, she got fired too.
Girls, how do you know when a guy is genuinely good and not just trying to get into your pants? I used to think that I was kind of obligated to have sex with my boyfriends when they wanted it just because that was what you did in order to be a good girlfriend. A few of my exes expected sex, so I just complied, even if I wasn't feeling well or was tired or whatever. One day, I was really sick and my current boyfriend was helping me out. I told him that I felt really bad, but I just didn't think I could have sex that night. He looked me dead in the eye and said, I don't need to have sex with you to love you. I learned a lesson that night about what a good man is. Remember, people, you do not have a right to sex. It is simply a privilege. When he does a nice thing, then doesn't make a big deal out of it because he's doing it for the sake of being a good person rather than hoping to get something extra out of it. Like if someone gives you a lift home and doesn't mention it ever again, except to accept or reject monetary payment. Nice guys, trademark, will give a lift home and then not let you out of the frickin' car afterwards saying, wow, that was a really nice thing I did for you. What are you going to do for me? I've never really liked the nice guy moniker. I know where it comes from. I get it, the whole I'm such a nice guy. Why does no one want to date me? So why don't we just, scrap the nice guy moniker and call them what they really are. Sexual opportunists. The night I knew I'd marry my husband was before we even started dating. I knew he'd been interested for a few months, but I wasn't available and he respected that. Never pushed boundaries I had set. One night, I was working a late shift and got ready to leave at about 10 p.m. I'd been dropped off earlier in the afternoon because my dumb butt forgot to put gas in my car, so it was sitting on the side of the freeway about half an hour drive away. I called my ride multiple times, nothing. I called my roommate, nothing. Called my friend that lived in the same town, nothing. I sent out texts, and after half an hour, no replies. I knew my coworker, now husband, lived in a town between where we worked and where I lived. I decided to call up a guy I barely knew outside of work and hope he was as kind as he seemed to be. 15 minutes later, he was picking me up. Of course, I was embarrassed and beside myself that no one had answered my calls and texts. He drove me to the nearest 24-hour store, bought a gas jug, drove to a gas station, went in to pay for the gas, came out with a cup of coffee too. It was just turning cold out. Drove me back to my car, got me squared away, and followed me back to the same gas station so I could fill up in case something went wrong. Y'all, I had plenty of money, I'm just forgetful. I stated this multiple times throughout the night. He just kept saying, you've had a long day, let me help. We get to the gas station, he fills up my tank and came back out with a pack of the brand of cigarettes I smoked at the time. Neither of us smoke anymore, but that was part of how we bonded starting out. Me, you didn't have to do that. Him, you said you were out. Me, I can buy a pack in the morning. You keep them. Him, you know I don't smoke this brand. And hands them to me. We're standing there, having a smoke, wrapping up the night, and I just start tearing up and tell him, I'm glad you exist. That's been something we repeat to each other now and then to this day. He never brought it up after that, except years later to tell me how angry he was that no one came to get me, and to confess that no one had ever told him they were happy he existed, and that he was happy he hadn't decided to drink that night like he normally would have. I wish someone told me they were happy I existed. But seriously, that's just beautiful. Just beautiful. If he remembers little details about you, like your dog's name or your sister's job, i.e. he actually pays attention when you talk. If he remembers the answer you gave when he asked, "What's up?" by following up with, "Oh, how did insert thing you did here go?" If he makes an effort to talk to you instead of just bugging you to hang out with him. If he doesn't constantly try to steer conversations towards flirting/sexual comments. If he's perfectly fine with you not being able to hang out if stuff comes up. Those are some of the things I look for, but then again, I've been fooled before. Trust your gut too. It's unrealistic to expect a guy to remember every little thing about you, but if he recalls something small, it proves he was paying attention. There are other ways guys can show this, like by asking more specific questions and remembering general facts about your life. If a guy puts effort into knowing you, he's genuine. Yeah, that's solid advice. Or, more probably, he's trying to steal your skin so he can insert himself into your life seamlessly by knowing everything about you, and then everyone grows to love him more than you, and he's some kind of superior version of you, like that run of Spider-Man where Dr. Octopus stole Spider-Man's body and became the superior Spider-Man, and then Peter Parker eventually got his body back, but that won't happen for you! Respect your boundaries. It wasn't until my current BF that I realized my feelings of feeling weirded out by all the guys before him was justified. They always pushed when I expressed hesitation or discomfort. I told my BF I wasn't ready, and he didn't make a move again for another 2 months until I was ready and initiated myself. Well, that certainly sounds like a long time in my unga bunga boy brain. I agree that boundaries should be respected. If you think the girl's worth waiting for 2 months, and by God, you respect that 2 months and you wait. I knew my husband was a keeper. He had been my friend first, but we lost contact because he had a crazy girlfriend. When we reconnected, she was officially his ex-girlfriend, but I had an emotionally abusive fiancé. He talked me out of it. He helped me get the courage to leave, and then he waited for me to heal. I gave him no time frame. I told him that I needed to be single before I made another commitment because he deserved to have all of me and be more than a rebound. Neither of us saw other people. We talked every day. I told him he didn't have to wait, but he insisted. When we saw each other again for the first time, he was an OTR truck driver. It clicked. We were meant to be. He switched to regional driver, I went back to college, and now we're building our lives. 7 years together, 4 married. That was nice. Easy. They treat you the same when the passion starts to decline and you are no longer tearing each other's clothes off. I know that makes my relationship sound bad, but long-term relationships go through these phases. When both parties are tired, stressed, etc., if your man stands by you, then he's a keeper. Short-term, I suppose, just wait until you know them before you sleep with them. That's not something I have been good at, though. I suppose just don't get emotionally invested in something that has not been properly defined. More solid advice. I like it. When my BF and I first got together, we were still teenagers. I got really drunk at a party and my friend bailed on me. I didn't have a ride or place to sleep that night. He took me to his house, brought me glasses of water and snacks, and didn't make a move on me all night, even when I slept in his bed in my underwear. We've been together for 4 years now. That's nice, even sweet, I might say, but also a pretty low bar to hold. Nice guys are nice to you. Nice guys are nice to people they don't want to get anything out of. I also have a theory that nice guys, in the "you should have sex with me, I'm a nice guy" sense, don't realize that being nice is the bare minimum, and thus you have to bring something else to the table. Be funny, be smart, be interesting. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some appeal in aesthetic, but don't claim nice like that's an achievement. You're supposed to be nice. Bragging about it is a sign that you don't understand that, and it's a pretty good indication that it's not genuine. I'll admit, sometimes I think a lot of people just get that impression of like, this is how a girl will like me by watching, like, I don't know, those really typical anime where a guy is just like, the bare minimum of nice to someone or kind in some small way, and the girl's like, no other guy's ever been like this before. Newsflash, boys, a majority of men in the world are not scumbags or total pieces of crap, and there is some solid competition out there. And if you want to compete, well, guess what? Self-improvement of the body and mind is necessary. You can never know, and I'm not a girl, but my significant other says that she could tell with me because I was the same around her as I was with my friends and her friends. I was respectful to her family, and I had a good career. Even then, there was skepticism at the start, but I just kept hanging out with her, and then we just had sex one day. It was a good day. Well, I guess it's not bad to get another perspective on the matter. It's really hard to initially tell. Usually I play it safe and don't really bring up anything sexual for a while. And if they're the type to really want sex and nothing else, usually they'll start making every conversation about it and almost insisting something happens soon. The ones you stick with are the ones that respect your boundaries and stay friends with you for you, not just your body. Oh, I don't know, there are some patient ones out there. But this individual is certainly not wrong. Watch his behavior. A genuinely good guy will invest his time in you, even if he's been busy. He'll reach out to see how your day was because he cares. Want to learn things about you. It won't be superficial facts. He wants to know about who you are, your hopes, family, the things most important to you. Support you. He will want to know your hopes, dreams, and ambitions. For example, you need to study and there's a party he wants you to go to with him. If you tell him your studies are more important, he won't pressure you or guilt trip you for not going. Show you off. He will want to go on dates, post pictures with you, tell his friends and family about you. He doesn't want to confine you only to his apartment or bedroom. Engages in meaningful conversation. He will try to connect on more than just a physical level. It will be intellectual and emotional. A lot can also be said from a guy's language. Listen for the way he speaks. Does he say you're beautiful or puts you down? You should do more squats. Only talk sexually about your looks. Watch his eyes. There's a difference between a loving look and a lustful look. Keep in mind that everyone has flaws and nobody is perfect. To expect anyone to complete a checklist on a daily basis is excessive. We are human. Mistakes happen. But with a genuinely good man, it won't be an everyday occurrence. He will care and always strive to improve. These are just a few differences that I've noticed about the players and the man who treats me like a princess. Hope it helps you. Best of luck. You meet your Prince Charming. Pretty much hit the nail on the head. With my current boyfriend, I knew it was when he invited me to meet his best friend. His best friend is old enough to be his dad, but they trust each other so much. They help each other with racing and are very close. Another sign is when he would tell me what people would say at work. His co-workers would joke about me or ask about me. So that meant they knew about me, and he talked about me. That's a huge sign. Yeah, I like this how I like my women. Short and sweet. That's actually an utter lie. I like tall women because I don't have to lean down to give them a kiss. You know a guy is genuinely good if he has a large anime collection that ranges from figures, manga, DVD sets, and if he has a katana, wears a dashing fedora, has a well-kept and well-moisturized neckbeard by Mountain Dew, Doritos, and grease, weighs at least 300 pounds, lives in his mom's basement at 37. Honestly, these types of guys are so much more genuine than a typical Chad trying to get laid. Picturing the dude from YOLO, Crystal Fantasy, or I don't know, he was better in the sequel, to be honest. He was hilarious in the sequel series. Reputation. Is he known in the friend circle for being a player? Stage in life. Does he talk about settling down with someone? Does he associate that someone with you? Personality. How does he behave around his close friends? What do they talk about? Does he keep his promises? Previous relationships. Does he have a previous long-term relationship? Did he have stages of one-night stands? Cheating history. Did he ever cheat before? If you're allergic to some food, does he avoid bringing that food near you? If you are sick, is he by your side? If you want to see him more often, does he make an effort to compromise? Yeah, that's all pretty correct stuff to be looking out for if you're, gauging a man for his long-term value, I guess. It's not a bad thing to think about, ladies. It's generally easiest to tell through how they treat people differently, but seeing them learn about your relationship status is obviously a shortcut if it's available to you. It's always a bummer when you're having a great time with a group of people and a guy you are hitting it off with, you platonically in your view, learns you're in a relationship and immediately starts to ignore you. It always really makes me sad, not that it happens a ton. I'm not a smoke show or anything. It's like, oh, I guess I'm just not as funny and interesting as I thought I was. That person didn't actually enjoy our conversation. He was just working on a potential lead. It really brings you low as a woman to see that guy continue to enthusiastically socialize with other guys in attendance after he stopped talking to you upon discovering your unavailability. I acknowledge the potential downsides to being on the male side of this equation. I was aware of them already, but now I've got an inbox nice and full of the same few messages over and over about how I just need to see it from a different perspective. I'm only trying to share my own experience and my own perspective of the downsides for women. That's an aspect that I've never really thought about. Not that I've ever chosen to just blatantly ignore a woman after finding out that she's taken or anything like that. But I also naturally understand the male perspective as well. Wherein, if you're a half-decent guy, if a woman says no, not not interested, or I have a boyfriend, I'm unavailable, whatever the reason is, you're just gonna move on, get on with your time, and keep on looking. And while patience may be a virtue, why get your hopes up in thinking that something could happen in the future that very well may never happen? You've already been disappointed, potentially even laid your soul bare. And some men, honestly, just don't have the stomach to look someone in the eyes that they've exposed themselves to. But again, I absolutely get where this woman is coming from. I never really thought about it like that. If he has crippling trust issues, he already doesn't expect anything from you. He doesn't expect anything from anyone. I feel like a dude wrote this. And yet, I hear that. I've found a really good checklist to be, is he trying to elicit a specific behavior or response from me? Or is he being sincere? Is he focused on how the situation affects him or how it affects me/the people around him? Example, I've had both good guys and nice guys tell me they had feelings for me. The nice guy said, "Well, I just don't understand why you won't go out with me. Like, what else could I do? You're the perfect girl for me. You don't know how hard it is to see the perfect person for you and not be able to have them." The good guy said, "Since we're friends, I think I owe it to you to be totally honest and tell you that I've started developing feelings for you. You don't have to reciprocate or anything right now. I just wanted to be upfront so things don't get weird later." Both hyperbole, I'm sure, because I don't think anyone actually speaks like that. Also, I'm seeing a lot of checklists on here. Women, can you just tell me, is that a thing you do? You just look for checklists on, how to spot the ideal man for you? I agree with the other posts, but to add something less conventional that might not apply to all guys, I find that when a guy is really, really interested, then they sometimes act nervous or hesitate a little. Makes it less likely that they're trying to get into someone's pants kind of guys and genuinely likes you and doesn't want to fudge it up. Oh, most definitely. I'll always remember the most nervous I was when I asked my girlfriend, "Do you want to play Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on the GameCube?"
Guy here. Everyone is a butthole about something. Grammar Nazi. Goes on and on about the difference between Star Trek and Star Wars. Obnoxious around sports. Obnoxious around politics. Snobbish about beer. Crossfitter. Gamer. Etc. Most of us learn to be civil about our buttholery, but we learn to manage it and recognize that it's kind of unacceptable. We apologize for it, but we don't hide it. If you can't find a guy's metaphorical butthole, he's definitely not a nice guy. The Duke couldn't agree more.
That's enough unnecessary editing on my part, but there was something vaguely Duke Nukem-esque about that comment for some reason. So my boyfriend and I were friends for a couple of years before we got together. I was dating another guy the entire time. I actually fell for current BF while dating the other guy. X was an abusive butthole. I didn't cheat on him, so regret nothing. He was into me and very much wanted to date me, but since I had a boyfriend, he accepted that it wasn't possible and was content to be my friend. Although I complained about the ex to him all the time, he had never once badmouthed him or disrespected our relationship. And when it got painful for him to be in love with a girl he couldn't have, he didn't take it out on me. He simply distanced himself a bit and let himself heal. He's a good man. That is pretty darn nice. I'm glad things worked out for them. I let guys know in advance that my pants are off limits. The ones who seem unfazed by this are generally better guys than the ones who pull a face and try to negotiate. Not even if the terrorists have placed a bomb in your nether regions and my penis is the only thing big or small enough to, get to it and disarm it? Bruno, how would your penis even operate the complicated bomb disarming gear?
I've been training for this very specific event my entire life.
If he treats me like a normal human being and not a locked chest in a video game and/or a math problem. That being said, sometimes you don't know until you do it with them and they turn into complete buttholes. I had a really close friend who acted like a genuine, real friend for about 1.5 years without trying to get in my pants, and then completely ghosts me once we had sex. It was really bizarre and kind of screwed up. A good tip to discern the latter. If they have a certain reputation or they treat you differently than others, it's a yellow flag and you should look a bit closer. So that's what women mean when they say they don't want to jeopardize the friendship. If his face lights up when he sees you, he respects when you say no, remembers your likes and dislikes, and he takes care of you when you're sick as a dog, even though you're contagious. You'll never find, as long as you live, someone who loves you tender like I do. When he does the right thing, even when he's conflicted at times, being aware of how his actions may make someone feel and is in tune with other people's emotions, not crossing boundaries with a lady, ever. After typing this, I feel like I'm asking for too much. Even I'm not this perfect. But no one needs to be perfect for someone to love them. Your question is vague, and if you want generic advice, just keep on scrolling through the numerous comments on what makes a good guy. A good guy is a subjective measure, so it's what works for you. That's why women struggle to leave abusive relationships, because somewhere in them, they find a good guy. Don't overanalyze this because it has to work for you. You should feel comfortable with the guy, and most importantly, you should have fun and it should be easy. If it's a struggle, then walk. What's stopping you? He hasn't gotten your pants already, so why are you worried of walking? If you're a good judge of character, you will get more good guys than bad, but that's because you judge character better and select more compatible matches, not because there are more or less good or bad guys out there. Reality is, all guys want to get in your pants. If we didn't, then we would be gay and want to get in another dude's pants. Your actual question is, how do I keep a guy in my pants? For that, you need to ask yourself, what do I actually bring to the table? Too many girls are just pretty and nothing more. Guys get bored of them and leave them or cheat, and the answer to that is lead a fulfilling life. Have interests, be curious, confident, and genuine. If you're an interesting woman that is able to look after herself, you will be more appealing to guys, and they will want to stick around. One final thing I would say, beware of the jealous guys that would prevent you from doing this. You need a person who will support you maturing as a human being, but at the same time be comfortable telling you that he doesn't like you seeing your ex, for example. For that, you need a guy who is confident and active and fulfilled himself. I ain't gonna lie, the guy came in pretty hot, sounding snobbish and overall rather disagreeable in general, but that's some solid advice right there. Probably some of the best advice that I've seen on this thread. My husband was the first guy I ever went on a real date with. On said date, it started raining while we were taking a walk outside, and he took off his jacket just to hold it over me. Before that, I thought real dates didn't actually happen anymore. He's always been the kindest and gentlest man I've ever had in my life. Never judges me or puts me down in any way. Even when guys are trying to act like they care to get in your pants, they are terrible at it and end up saying or doing something degrading. Well, you sound quite happy with your husband, but that also sounded like a low note to end on, and I shall not allow it. My husband and I didn't kiss until we got engaged, and didn't do anything past that until we were married. It's been 11 years now, and we're still going strong. I know it's not a popular way to go about it, but it worked for us.
Oh yeah! Good old Christian boys and girls in the house!
But for real though, I have mad respect for people who can wait that long and be that dedicated to one another without, being intimate like that. I mean, I said at the very beginning, my Unga Bunga man brain says to me 2 months to wait that long is a pretty long time. If you gave me that as a definitive time to wait that long for intimacy, I might make myself a goddamn advent calendar for like Christmas time with the chocolates in it to, give myself something to look forward to every day.
Lawyers of Reddit. At what point, when working for a defendant, did you realize my client is a monster? A lot of years ago, I used to work as a solicitor's representative. Cases go to Crown Court, barrister deals, and I am there for the paperwork, additional stuff with client, etc. 70-something-year-old man had been in jail for 15 years for an assault on a child. Solicitor and barrister working on getting him released due to him getting clean reports from just about everyone. Guards took him out of jail to a dentist, and as he entered the waiting room, he saw 2 children and ran straight at them. Guards stopped him. 3 weeks later at court, I was the one that sat him down in a room to explain that no, this isn't a hearing to release you. It is so you could be committed to a mental health secure facility for the rest of your life. He didn't take that well. I shed no tears. I am not a lawyer, but a legal assistant. We got a client off of a murder charge. 2 weeks later, she was caught with a similar weapon and situation, except this time, the guy didn't die. Not the client, but my managing partner. The client was a senile 90-year-old man. He wanted to sell land worth a little less than $1 billion to some businessmen. Suffice to say, there were many who wanted to take advantage of the situation. One such person, to my dismay, was our managing partner. The partner wanted to insert a provision that would have effectively funneled about 60% of the proceeds solely to him. You could see how his eyes gleamed at the mere mention of money. The provision, quote, got lost in the revisions. I was doing the revisions. I'm no longer part of that scummy firm. My general psychology professor worked for the state of Arkansas assessing criminals to see if they would qualify as criminally insane. He told us a story one time about a guy who would get glass shards and hide them underneath his skin, presumably to use at a more opportune time. He said his interview with the guy made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. I'm on the other side, but I've got a defendant who went to prison for starving 3 adopted children to the point that they needed weeks of hospitalization, then got out of prison and married a guy with children so that she could start starving them too. Listening to her interview where she attempts to justify what she did to both sets of kids disturbed me more than any of the murder cases I've worked on. We had a client try and enforce a post-employment restraint against a 19-year-old receptionist after she quit and started working for a competitor. The reason? He wanted to, quote, make her life hard because she wouldn't sleep with him, a creepy 57-year-old man. Him trying to sleep with her was the reason she quit. Unsurprisingly, he didn't take our advice to discontinue his claim, and so we ended up sending him elsewhere. Hey, so at this point in recording, I kind of realized that the thread continues into a whole bunch of really sad, depressing, graphic, and violent stories. So I'm just letting you know now, this is where things start getting really bad. Seriously, viewer discretion is advised. I listened to a 911 call where the victim's throat was slit while on the call by her client. I will never forget her gurgling and sounding like she was dying. Somehow, she ultimately lived through this, saying, "He killed me. He killed me." She tried to sell her baby. I found out during a hearing in front of the judge. Oh, I can share a good story. I had a teacher in high school who was a former lawyer. We always asked him why he gave up his practice to start teaching. He finally caved and explained that his last case was the defense of 3 people. Apparently, there had been a 4th. It was 2 couples who, in the act of a drunken, drugged-out orgy, decided to kill, partially eat, and dismember one of the women. I guess it seemed like a good idea at the time. As a lawyer, he said it was pretty open and shut, but he had to get his clients the best result possible, and he was exposed to all the horrid details, the pictures, and their reasoning. My teacher had such a far-off look when he explained it that we could see it really got to him. The first and last family law case was assigned to me as a first-year associate. My client broke his wife's jaw and said that if they were home in Russia, he would have killed her because he could pay his way out of prison there. My mom is a lawyer. This is the story about how she quit being a public defender. When you're a public defender, you don't get to choose your cases. She got assigned a young man who, with the help of his girlfriend, had gotten a kitten from a, quote, free to a good home ad in the newspaper. Then they brought it home and gave it to their dog as a chew toy. I think they also filmed it. So yeah, she said she needed a shower after every meeting with him, canceled her PD contract after the case concluded. I've done a lot of prison legal aid, and I could tell stories about kitty diddlers that would turn you green, but instead, I'll turn you green a different way. I had a kid, 17, who was mildly cognitively disabled due to brain trauma he sustained at the hands of his birth parents, who ended up with a really wonderful foster care family and thrived. He was a popular kid in school, good athlete, got a girlfriend, and invited her to meet up and be teenagers one night in a corn silo, which I guess is a thing that country kids do. I don't know. This all comes from the pre-sentence investigation report I read before taking his case. But this girl met him at the silo and they were hanging out inside. By his account, they were having a nice time and he was really enjoying himself. Then, for no particular reason, he picked up a 2x4 and bashed her skull in. He then used a combination of very crude farm implements, like shovels and hoes, to chop her body up and bury it in the corn and went home like nothing had happened. Hey, you asked. Had a divorce client, husband and father, who disowned his autistic son, tried to argue that he should get all of his wife's retirement having not worked for 12 years, contacted me during the height of Hurricane Sandy. He was in the Bronx and me in Manhattan, saying he wanted to hold his wife in contempt for not paying him that day while the storm slammed NYC, told me I was making a huge mistake getting married. My wedding date was November 3rd, 4 days after Sandy, saying that I was going to be miserable and regret it. I could go on. But the worst was when, several months later, since his divorce was taking a long time, he sent death threat letters to myself and my wife saying that he had hired an executor to kill the 2 of us if his divorce wasn't finalized in 60 days. Called the police and they said he left his premises 1 day earlier. I heard nothing from him until February 2014 when he emailed me saying he needed a winter coat from his wife and could I help get it for him. Ironically, the divorce didn't have to be completed because he ended his own life before the judge signed the judgment of divorce. TLDR, miserable guy who wanted to spread his misery and crossed the line when he threatened to kill my wife. Edit. For something a little lighter, this Memorial Day weekend reminds me of not my worst client, but definitely my dumbest. I was representing her on a child custody and child support matter. She was calling me on Memorial Day saying she really needed to speak to me. I called her back and asked if it was urgent since it was Memorial Day and all. She said, "Oh, I didn't think that Jews celebrated Memorial Day, so I thought you were going to be available." I had a client who was accused of domestic violence. Essentially, he threw his girlfriend out of a second-story window. Now, he's got a terrible history, but so do a lot of my clients, and his attitude is a little entitled, also typical. But he also knows the deal and wants a plea deal, so I'm not really prepared when he absolutely refuses the no jail offer from the state. Keep in mind, there were like 5 witnesses. Why? Because they wanted him to pay for her medical bills. Okay, a jerk, but whatever, not the worst. What did it was his counteroffer. "I ain't paying that woman's bills. Tell them I'll pay for the window." Prosecutor was not happy. A bit shocked to learn that by throwing someone out of a second-story window in front of 5 witnesses, it was possible for him to get offered no jail time. The first week I started at my current criminal defense firm, I was tasked with cataloging discovery from our client's phone. The phone had multiple, talking around 4,000, videos, photos, and text exchanges with women under 16. Though not all of the girls' ages were confirmed, most, if not all, were under the legal age of consent and many were barely pubescent. Naked and being prostituted over 1 year. He would lure these girls in exchange for drugs. Nothing felt totally bizarre until I came across one video where he was clearly forcing himself upon a literal child who was so high on drugs, not willingly, but rather forced, and choking her in the process. When our firm confronted him, he said he was in love with her and that's why he did it. He would also take these girls to hotels and make them bang with one another while he taped, but nothing beat what I said above. Pretty horrifying stuff for my first week on the job. When this person, an executive, said she was firing any employee who had a serious illness or injury, while promoting fundraisers at a local church for cancer sufferers no less, in part because employees, thinking she'd be sympathetic, would reveal their confidential health info to her. Criminal defense lawyer. I can name a few instances where I was just absolutely disgusted with my client. Caveat, these are mostly years ago when I was taking just any old case. I most practice white collar and federal now. Number 1. I won a DUI case because the government messed up on something right before trial was to begin. My client gives me a hug and completely reeks of alcohol. He was driven to court. I took his keys and called his mother. Number 2. Client who was accused of touching a 12-year-old. He was mid-40s at the time, and I had to shut him down real quick when he tried to tell me how the 12-year-old was coming on to him. Number 3. I represented a woman for a grand theft charge. Left her in my office to get some things copied before she left. After she left, I realized my sunglasses and car keys were stolen. I tracked her down in the lobby and told her I was not going to represent her anymore, and I would call the police if she didn't empty her pockets in front of me and give me my things. Number 4. I had a client who was released after 25 years in prison for murder, and then the same day he beats up his prospective new landlord. He ended up getting another 10 years. He was unrepentant and laughed about how he hit the guy so hard his eyeball popped out. I thought, this guy deserves to be in prison. Took the case to trial anyway and, shocker, lost, and he got 10, the max. Number 5. Client who pretended to be a doctor so he could sell steroids. According to the Gov, he had numerous clients who were made to believe that his steroids would cure their cancer. They paid him hundreds of thousands of dollars and some of them died. I just thought that was pure evil. Defended my client in a lawsuit who defrauded his business partners. Evidence was already overwhelming that my client was liable. Client made matters worse by fabricating evidence and presenting it in court. He got called out on it by his dad's attorney who had the same evidence. It tanked my client's case. My client continued lying to me despite the overwhelming evidence showing he fabricated evidence. He lost big. In addition to a large judgment, he got hit with several felonies for fabricating evidence. Also, the business partners my client screwed over were his dad and brother. My significant other's mother, Elle, was abusive. She frequently hit her husband, was a compulsive liar, and just generally made her family miserable. When they were settling the divorce, the judge initially deemed a testimony from the kids, my SO and her brother, unnecessary, probably because they were minors at the time, and testifying against one of their parents would be hard on them, to say the least. However, the lawyer representing Elle was really insistent that they testify. Well, it must have been a shock to the lawyer to suddenly have 2 more witnesses with dozens of accounts of driving under the influence, domestic violence, etc., etc. We figured Elle must have lied to her lawyer about some significant details because they were completely caught off guard and more than a little angry after the testimony. We like to believe it helped solidify some of the criminal charges placed against her. It was a nice bit of karma after years and years of gaslighting and false rumors that her own lies got her caught. Content warning, this one's pretty gory. Attorney's wife here. I used to help him file away evidence and reports. Came across a file with video. Curiosity got the better of me, especially when husband told me not to watch it. File gives this story. Woman was at a boyfriend's trailer out in the middle of nowhere, got mad at boyfriend, so smacked him in the head with the metal bat and went on her merry way home. Boyfriend is apparently not a pleasant person, and nobody really misses him or looks for him. He is fired from work in absentia. On day 7, boyfriend's neighbor finally stops by, hears hoarse screaming, and calls police. That's where the video came from. Day 7. One of the cops was wearing a camera on his uniform. It shows him and his partner going through the house, finding dog feces all over the floor. Boyfriend's 2 Rottweilers, who were also in the house, went without food for about 6 days before they started eating bits and pieces of him. The camera shows the moment the cop found the body on its side, rolled it over, and he's blinking. Eyes open, with most of his face gone. The woman didn't even bother to let the dogs out before she left. I do not help file cases anymore. When I had to go to the U.S. Attorney's Office to view the evidence in this case, there they were. Hundreds of images of CP that he had traded, the close-up images of genitals that he had taken and sent around the internet, the pictures of his neighbor's daughters playing in their kiddie pool. Realized he just could not help himself. But he also never once claimed responsibility or showed remorse, so I don't feel too badly for him. Late to the party, but anyways, my first internship in law school was at a matrimonial law firm in a very wealthy area. Think millionaires and billionaires getting divorced. One of the first cases I worked on involved the parents of a victim of a high-profile school shooting. The parents were divorced and had been prior to the death of the child, and were now battling over who would get the victim's compensation fund money and the funds they received from a fundraiser they set up themselves on a GoFundMe-type site. These were incredibly wealthy people fighting over what was literal chump change to them and asking the public to donate to them as if they needed it. They were so clearly exploiting the death of their child for money and to tick off the other parent. It was honestly one of the most disturbing things I have encountered ever. Not a lawyer, but worked for a law firm as an investigator. One of our clients stabbed an ex-lover multiple times over $100. Perp then ran out of the house all bloody. Neighbor and her teenage daughter see him covered in blood and rush inside to see if they can help while they call 911. Victim is still alive. On the 911 call the daughter made, you can hear the mom singing Amazing Grace while she tried to stop the bleeding. You can also hear the victim, with a stab wound in her neck, gurgling on blood while she tries to sing along. The EMTs arrived in under 3 minutes, but it took the police 19 minutes from the call to show up to clear the scene for them. She lived for 17 minutes. I saw the photos of the scene with the body still in place. It looked like a scene straight from Dexter. Oh man, I'm always late when I have a good one. Not a defendant, but a divorce. Client is a late 30s woman, 2 kids, idyllic suburban life with her incredibly lucrative medical profession husband. He caught her cheating. He wanted to patch things up, she decided on a divorce. So far, nothing out of the ordinary, unfortunately. Then I start getting the details. He caught her on his birthday, in their bed, while the kids were downstairs. Dude decided to come home early as a surprise, and his wife was getting banged by a 19-year-old. But wait, there's more. Really fun stuff from the husband. Guy had been treated for gonorrhea twice, and both times he had caught it from his wife. The second kid wasn't his. It was obvious because the child was 100% some race, and the dad was not that race. Bad stuff, right? Well, enter the texts, emails, etc. She was carrying on like a dozen affairs at any given time, spanning years. She would bring them home and tell the kids they were electricians, plumbers, etc. She'd screw other guys within minutes of dropping her kids off at school. I've met some awful people in my time, but this woman straight up told me how much this guy loved her and how much she manipulated the crap out of him. He knew about a lot of the stuff, and each time he found something new, he just tried to win her back. I don't want to go into the details of what happened, but some money that you get, you really don't want. Lifelong criminal defense lawyer here. To be completely honest, it's not about the offense, but about the person. I've had people accused of murder that I really kind of liked and thought well of. I've had people accused of shoplifting who have given me the heebie-jeebies and seem like psychopaths. Speaking purely from a criminal standpoint, having a client who is a monster doesn't matter in terms of your duty to them, but it does make the job less pleasant. My worst clients have been people who are comfortable scamming others of their money. Murder, robbery, and most crimes involve regular people who did or may have done something stupid due to alcohol or situations. But the client you keep an eye out are the ones charged with fraud and the like. Liars, cheats, and all-around shady people, generally speaking. Even the gangs operate on a code of conduct, an old-fashioned war-like code of conduct. Honor and courage are important to them, even though they commit crimes. 22 years threatened twice, so not that bad. The real danger? Not in criminal law. It's family law. That's where people get really heated. It's personal. Prosecutor here. Most of us in this profession have the utmost respect for those on the other side of the aisle. Most people really don't know or understand the really messed up stuff that we have to witness and deal with on a daily basis. There's a reason attorneys have the highest percentage of alcoholics by profession. I never thought my client is a monster, but there are a few I've thought were idiots or liars or both. Two of my favorites are a client who instructed me, against my advice, to object to the temporary judge even though we had just discussed it and I had just told the judge we were okay with him. And a client who testified pretty much the exact opposite of what she had told me in our initial meetings and what we had repeatedly discussed. Civil defense here, so maybe not as juicy as some of the criminal defense folks. Some of the work I do is employment defense, particularly sexual/age harassment/discrimination cases. I'm pretty cynical and see a lot of cases where plaintiffs are full of it, particularly in harassment/discrimination cases. In one case, I was defending a company and that company's manager jointly. The manager seemed like a straight-up guy, and I pride myself in being a good judge of character. I was pretty convinced the case was just payback from a disgruntled employee. To my credit, the plaintiff, a 30-year-old female, was a really poor employee by all accounts. Still, it didn't prepare me from what I found during a review of every email the company had stored on their servers. Not only did this guy stick his hand down this woman's shirt without consent, when she threatened to go to HR, he said he'd get her fired and make sure she never got a job again. The lady was a single mother with 3 kids. He also propositioned her for screwing in exchange for a day off. He thought the email had been wiped because the company had a 1-year retention policy. Apparently, some of the company's older emails remained on a server before the policy was put in place because of the migration of the emails from an older outsourced IT company. Not sure if my terminology is right here. I had to substitute out of the case thereafter for conflict reasons, since my 2 clients' interests were no longer aligned. Very disturbing content warning. Even though I've made a throwaway, I'm going to be a bit vague because I still take my ethical duties to former clients seriously and can't breach privilege or the NDA I signed. This is a story from a long time ago, during the summer after my first year of law school while I was briefly working at a well-known criminal defense firm. The client whose case I was working was one of several defendants charged with a conspiracy to commit murder. 3 individuals had committed the murders, and several others had either helped plan it, abducted the victims, came along to watch, or filmed it. In order to see whether our client was one of the individuals present at the scene, I had to watch multiple videos of the murders. I watched multiple people brutally killed in about the worst possible way you can imagine. They were chopped into pieces while they were alive and had their skulls stomped in. It wasn't some grainy security footage. It was HD video taken by bystanders just a few feet away. The videos showed someone's brain squirting out of their head and another person screaming as their hands and arms were hacked off. I also had to listen to the audio to see if our client's voice could be heard. The screams were bad. The laughter was worse. It has stuck with me for years and years, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. Thankfully, my internship at that firm ended a few weeks later at the end of the summer. I never looked up the sentence from the case, and have no desire to. In our case, there was no presumption of innocence. The individuals involved had all taken pleas in hope that the prosecutors wouldn't seek the death penalty. The only thing that would change was whether our client would get the death penalty if he was present/filming, or life in prison if we showed that he played a more minimal role. Working in criminal defense meant setting my judgment for people aside so that they could be afforded the rights guaranteed to them by the Constitution. I still did my job to the best of my ability, but I found myself lying awake at night for several weeks in a row, praying to every god I knew that each of them involved would fry in the electric chair, and that someone would laugh at their screams too. After that internship, I never returned to criminal law. I now practice civil law, where I help people recover for wrongs done to them.
People who've outrun the cops. How did you do it? Don't know if this counts, but my friend and I were busted for being 19 and 20 and drinking at a party. Everyone ran, but I hid and they ended up never finding me. I spent an entire 7 hours pretzeling in a woven basket in a closet, wide awake and slowly sobering. The scariest part was when they started searching said closet right after the bust and the cop moved clothes from above my head to reveal my hair and still didn't see me. Good times. Got to love the differences between the US and the UK. Busted for drinking at 19 and 20 in a private residence. I was a baby-faced 15-year-old drinking a pint in a pub. Police officer came in, told me to finish my pint and go home. They let you finish for the greater good. The greater good. The greater good. There were a lot of people and I was faster than 50% of them. Just like my zombie apocalypse plan. The benefit of smoking green herb in a forest and getting caught is that you're in a forest. We just took off. Hard to catch up when there's all kinds of crap to avoid. Personally, I don't rate my survival odds as being very high running through a forest at night while high on green herb, but I'm glad it worked for you. Hanging out at a friend's house when my mum texts me to inform me that my girlfriend is on her way back from college to surprise me. My girlfriend hated the dude I was hanging out with, so I didn't tell her I was there and recently told her I was home. I jump in the car and started flying home on a road that I should definitely not be flying on. As God fated, I pass a cop and I see him hit his brakes in my rear view. I instinctively floor it over the hill, pull into a parking lot and cut my lights off. Nighttime. Few seconds pass and I see him fly by with his wee-woos on. With no time to spare, I pull back out soon after and I finish flying home. Run inside, jerk my clothes off, lay on the couch, turn on the TV, and she knocks on the door not 5 seconds later. Mission accomplished. Wow, your mum is pretty fantastic for giving you a heads up. Mine would have thrown me under the bus immediately. She's a better wingman than my little brother. When I was younger, I was dating a girl at work. I had faked sick and called in on a Friday to go to a party, and for reasons I no longer remember 16 years after the fact, I didn't tell the girl. So I'm at the party and get a call from my buddy who tells me the girl heard I was sick and was on the way to my house to take care of me and bring soup. I rushed home and my little brother was the only one there, so I tell him, "Look, this girl is going to be here any minute and she thinks I'm sick, so just roll with it, okay?" I heard the doorbell from my room and prepared to put on my sick act. After laying in bed for 20 minutes, I go upstairs to see what's going on. I ask my brother what happened and he said, "I just told her you were sick, so go away." On my way to a concert on a motorcycle, I was kinda racing on another bike up the highway. Went past a state boy at about 100 miles per hour and jumped off the next exit, the correct exit for the concert. Basically, I was able to get past the line of traffic into the event and scoot around a gate that was closed by riding on the footpath. Made my way to an area where there was literally 100 plus bikers. Ditched my helmet, removed the jacket and sat on a picnic table while they went around and around looking for me. So not so much outran, but outplayed. Thankfully, they never got close enough to read my plate. I was leaving town, heading out into the country on my Triumph, probably cruising at around 80. Pass a sheriff sitting on his little gravel drive. I figured, screw it, immediately downshifted and slammed the throttle open. By the time he hits his lights, I'm doing like 120 and climbing, and he must have figured out it wasn't worth the time because he just shut them back off. Didn't even shift out of park, I don't think. On foot versus a cop car. Ran halfway into a residential block through backyards, aware that they saw which direction I went. Once they were out of sight, I doubled back and ran half into the block in the opposite direction. Sat quietly in a bush. They circled a few times and left that block. I didn't do anything, just ran when a cop car drove by. I was a bored kid. My two buddies and I used to walk to a gas station at night when we were younger because they were 24/7 and sold huge burritos for $1. One of us was strangely afraid of the cops. One night we're walking and he sees a cop driving by and he immediately takes off in a sprint and hops a fence, leaving us awkwardly sitting out there with our burritos. The cop stops and was like, We get our friend to come back and apologize for being weird. Cop tells him he's a strange kid and circles the block a few more times to make sure we get home okay. I remember being like 17 and a group of us went rabbit hunting at night. We would basically ride around the cane fields and shoot rabbits. We would be drinking and stuff, and considering there wasn't crap else to do, it's what we did. So we finish up our hunt and we're exiting the cane fields onto the main highway. It would take us about 10 minutes to get back to my friend's house, and considering there was like 8 of us in a single cab Chevy, a few were riding on the bed of the truck. We jump onto the highway and make it about a mile when a cop turns his lights on. My buddy immediately pulls over and the rest of us are hiding our booze. As soon as the truck stops, one of my friends jumps out the back of the truck, drives into the bayou, crosses it, and takes off running. The thing is that the cop was a friend of ours. He had graduated the year before and recognized the truck, knew what we were doing, and wanted to mess with us and see how many we killed. I didn't hear from my buddy that jumped out the back of the truck until next afternoon, when I asked him why he did that. He said it was because he had half a joint in his pocket. This was before pagers or cell phones were a thing, thus the delay in communication. Running into a woods from a bonfire party. Knew previously from running into the woods where the barbed wire fence was and how to get through it. The cop in the dark did not. He was 15 feet behind me, then 100 feet behind me real fast. Wasn't worth giving me the MIP, so he turned back after that. Yee-haw. If he had seen my face, I wouldn't have run. With my car, among everyone else's sitting there, I would have felt way too paranoid driving later. Oh, that sounds rough to be that cop. Maybe he wasn't so much giving up the chase as going to attend to his wounds. We escaped by running. Me and my friends were on the cross-country team. We casually ran 2 miles away. We were drinking in a park. Once we took off, the cops gave chase for about 100 yards and figured, screw it. It wasn't exactly a badass escape, but it was funny as heck. I'm imagining the cops chasing you during a cross-country meet and them getting really exhausted. In a town with a small police force. Hid, then placed an anonymous call tipping the police off that we were back at the scene of the crime, so the officers following us would return there. I've silently dipped out of a group as the cops were fast approaching, but never had to actually outrun them. There's some telltale signs at a party the cops are going to be called within a half hour in all likelihood. When the beer runs out, when the furniture gets lit on fire, potato cannon fired at vehicles, someone dives out of a window to not be seen until the next week, axe-throwing contests and sword fighting while they let the pigs out in a suburban neighborhood down the street from the high school. Senior year of high school, the night before Halloween. My friend dressed as a banana and I dressed as a gorilla. I was going to chase him around campus during school on Halloween, so we decided to go for a quick test run around the neighborhood late at night. We ran around and the banana costume we made was holding up real nicely. We saw a car turning around at a cul-de-sac, so we decided to run past it and see the driver's reaction. About 20 feet away from it, we realized it was a cop car. We were out past curfew, and the cops really do nab you for that here. So we stopped in our tracks and book it for the nearest park. Cop follows. My friend, a cross-country runner, took off ahead of me in his banana suit far into the park, into a trail deep into the neighborhood. I, a chubby dude in a gorilla suit, was wheezing when I got to the park. There were some trees that were about as wide as me, so I take cover behind one of them. The cop shines his searchlight around, and I'm terrified he can see a piece of my suit sticking out from the tree. After what seems like an eternity, the cop finally turns off his light and leaves. Phew. My time to shine. I was 17 and dumb and on my way to a meeting a few towns over. Where I live is so flat that you can watch your dog run away for 3 days, so there are often long stretches of road in an open field. I was turning left onto a 2-lane highway when I saw these 2 cars blow past me, going the direction I was going, at least 90 miles per hour. I said, well, let's make this a convoy. I got up to about 120 to catch them up, and I was about with them when I saw a semi-truck coming in the opposite direction. I thought to myself, how boned would I be if there was a cop driving behind that semi? Sure as God's got sandals, there was a cop driving behind the semi. The first 2 cars passed, and I just saw his lights come on as I passed him. I thought, oh frick. Reckless OP, jail, I'm going to lose my license, I'm screwed. I start slowing down and reach into my wallet for my license, when I see a house coming up on my right side on the small side street. There was a house and a 2-car garage off to the side. I slammed on my brakes and took the turn, and I pulled right into this perfect stranger's open garage like I own the place. I get out, shaking because I'm not out of the woods yet. I walk out of the garage and up to the front door of the house and knock. An old lady answers, and I tell her I'm here to work on my car and asked if Jack was home. All BS. She said, no, I'm sorry. I profusely apologized and turned around. Just then, I saw the cop fly past the house in hot pursuit of the other 2 cars. I got back into my car and took the back roads for the rest of the trip. I've beaten them several times. One of those times was in a bad neighborhood. As soon as he swung on me, I pulled into the first driveway and went to the door and knocked. I told the person that answered the door that the cop coming down the road was going to pull me over for speeding, that I had a suspended driver's license and would give them $20 to act like they knew me and to let me in. The cop stopped in front of the house, but the guy let me in. I paid the guy the $20, bull-crapped around for about 20 minutes watching the Wheel of Fortune with him and his wife, then went on my merry way. Relatively small downtown area, was coming into town at 45 miles per hour, and the cop was coming the other way, directly at me. I was probably doing about 20 miles per hour over the limit, and he lit my butt up with a radar gun. He passed me, and I saw him turn around in my rearview mirror and flick on the lights. Generally, I would never run, but I was 18 and was one speeding ticket away from losing my license on points. I gunned it, got into town, and just weaved through a bunch of side streets until I was pretty sure I lost him. Here's the kicker, I'm pretty sure I lost him, and now I need to get back onto the main highway quickly. I'm sitting at a red light, waiting for the light to turn, and guess who goes right through the intersection in front of me? It was 1 a.m. or so not many cars on the road. My headlights shined right onto his car as he went in front of me, enough that I could see the guy. 18-year-old me crapped a brick. The cop kept going, and I gunned it to get onto the highway. I wonder if the cop had actually just given up on the chase at that point. From some of the other stories, it seems like they don't always pursue these things that rigorously. Story time. When I was about 14, there was this local store owner who treated the kids like crap, so kids started egging his business. So one night, me and my overweight friend decided it's our turn to egg his place. Of course, that was the night he and his friends decided to hide in the store to catch any said eggers, and as soon as I let the first egg fly, they busted out the door after us. I've never seen a fat kid run as fast as my friend. He outran me, and I ran track. I still had a few eggs in my hands, so I started throwing them behind me, and I could hear them cursing. I'd like to think that it slowed them down from catching us, but in reality, a bunch of 30-year-old, overweight, beer-drinking stoners weren't going to catch two 14-year-old boys that were scared crapless and running on pure adrenaline. We put the distance between us and them quickly. So here it is, 1 a.m. in a small town, and at this point, we're about 10 blocks from the place we egged. We're on the business side of streets. I want to cross the road so we're in the houses side, where it would be a lot harder for the police to catch us. After hiding in some bushes for a bit and looking to make sure the coast is clear, we make our move. No sooner than we hit the street, we see a cop car like 5 blocks up drive from one street to the next, with a direct line from the police officer's view looking right at us. Suddenly, we heard the screech of his tires as he shot past us, and the sound of the car being revved up in reverse. But by this time, we're hopping back fences and covering blocks and blocks in a matter of minutes. At this point, I'd say we were on the run for about 30 minutes. So we wind up going 10 blocks in basically a C pattern to where we hop fences and cross yards, and we wind up by a house that has a huge weeping willow in front of it, has a direct view of the store we egged, and we can see the police lights, but the tree is so big we can't see past it. But it's the perfect place to hide under, to see what's going on. So we go under it, and we're probably about 7 blocks away, and take a look. I crap you not, there were over a dozen police cars there. This was before the small town I lived in turned to crap, so the police routinely had nothing to do back then. So my friend is like, "Holy crap, look at all these police cars, we're screwed!" Meanwhile, I was saying out loud, "I can't believe there are this many police cars over one frickin' egg." My friend was panicking, and I was actually just annoyed that they were making this big a deal out of it. So he says, "Let's just turn ourselves in," and I was like, "No frickin' way." If they were going to make such a big deal, I felt it was the principle that we had to make it back to his house and get away, even if it was just for that night. I said, all we have to do is go 5 more blocks till we're out of sight of the police, and then cut across to where so far away they won't even think we made it that far. He says, "I don't know any of that area. I'm not getting bit by some dog running through backyards." I said, "Mother fricker, we already cut through like 20 backyards, and I'm pretty sure a dog is going to bark before we even get over a fence." I told him he can turn himself in, but I'm making a break for it. He decided to stay with me, so it took us another hour of quietly sneaking through backyards until we were enough distance away that we felt we could cross the main street where all the cops drove to make it back to his place. I considered it a personal victory that we outran half the police force in our town to make it back to his place, even though we turned ourselves in the morning. We left our bikes at the scene of the crime because we were idiots. I still look back at that time and smile. My one and only cop story. In 8th grade, my friend and I were both crammed in one of those electric razor scooters, heading home, and some lady started yelling at us. My friend slowed us down to hear what she was saying. Apparently, she was giving us a heads up that a cop was a block away. We got off the scooter and walked past the cop and went on our way. In conclusion, avoided confrontation altogether. Was with a friend running, suspecting that cops had been called, and we hid in a bush. I turn to my friend and say, "We need to go, but we have to walk." So we step out of the bush, and not 20 seconds later, a cop car drives straight past us, didn't even slow down. More often than not, if you act innocent, people will think that you're innocent. I train a lot. I run 5 to 6 days a week, 1 long day, usually 1 interval day, and 3 to 4 easy days. So I signed up for the local police fundraiser 5K, beat all the cops to the finish line. I told them they should add more speed work to their training if they want to catch me next year. I feel like this commenter might have taken the title in a little too abstract an interpretation, but I applaud him nonetheless. Now, settle in for a monster story to finish off the video with. Obligatory, not me, but my brother. The following is absolutely true. Gather round, Redditors, as I regale you with the tale of Bad Luck Mike and one of the times he got away from the man. I take you back to the halcyon days of 1990. Y2K was a decade away, and Prince had been hyping some big party he was planning in the works for 8 years at the time. Supposed to be a hell of a bash. Mike had committed a crime in our small suburb of Fort Worth, Texas. Frankly, the crime doesn't matter at this stage in the tale. Point is, he was on the run. Fortunately, our suburb had lots of creeks and storm drains and gullies crisscrossing through it. Every neighborhood was in the vicinity of a small brook of some sort. Also, fortunately, Mike was in the prime of his life. About 23 years old, 6'4", thin as a rail, with a hollow leg to hold all the beer he could steal on a given night, and the biggest swinging member in the town, whether anyone else knew it or not, and the unmitigated gall to go with it. So Mike was running over the hill and dale and crossing under a dim streetlight here and there on the run to one of his friends' place. But lo, a new problem arose, the baying of hounds in the distance. Johnny Law had called in the dogs. Now Mike started jumping fences, scaring little old ladies, and he finally took to where he would have the greatest chance of losing the fuzz. The creeks. Splashing through murky water all throughout our tiny burg, Mike tried to outfox the dogs until he finally came upon an idea and headed for the police station. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why in the frick would you go to the beehive while the bees are already on the hunt for you? But Mike had a plan. See, in Mike's mind, it made perfect sense to walk right by the cop shop. It's the last place anyone would ever think to look for him, and it had worked before. Mike once evaded arrest for a full week while the Fort Worth cops, in a bit of jurisdictional cooperation, tossed our town to bits searching for him. How? Why, he sat in the FWPD lobby and caught up on his reading, for free, from the library, while they searched for him high and low. I told you, unmitigated gall. So Mike finally came upon the police station and he sat back in a copse of trees making sure the coast was clear. He was covered in mud and muck, all manner of nastiness, and by the sounds of things, the dogs were getting closer. Heart in his throat, there was always the chance he would get seen by someone who was in the right place at the wrong time. Mike walked right by the PD and across the street, to the little laundromat where we washed our clothes every week. At the time, in our town, pretty much all activities stopped around 8 p.m. on the main drag. It was common to leave your front door unlocked and the keys in your car. There wasn't that much crime. So of course, there were no cameras to see Mike kick open the door of the laundromat, close it again behind him, and strip down to his aforementioned swinging eggplant. Using the change in his pockets, he washed and dried his clothes, and he gave himself a decent scrub in the laundromat restroom sink. An hour later, Mike was walking down the street minding his own business. Presently, the flashing lights behind him caused him to look back quizzically and give the universal hand gesture that says, "What did I do?" An incredibly corpulent cop jumped out of the vehicle looking like he'd had a few too many liters of cola, and with his light in Mike's face said, "I caught you." Another universally understood gesture from Mike, palms up, facing away from him, worry and innocence etched up on his face. "Whoa, Ed, what's up? I'm just going over to so-and-so's house. I'm not doing anything." Of course, Mike knew the cop. Mike knew all the cops. All of us did. We'd had them all in our house at some point in their careers, and it was well known that Mike made a cop's career interesting, starting from the age of 15 when he'd become a priest for a few hours in order to pull a truck heist. A tale for another day, gentle Redditors. Ed knew he'd been chasing Mike for the past hour. Mike knew it too, but Mike wasn't about to let Ed get a collar on him. "I've been after your butt for an hour, Mike. I've been chasing you through mud and crap, and goddammit, I got you." Wait, Ed, Mike reasoned. "You've been chasing me for an hour through mud and crap? Ed, I don't have a spot on me. I'm perfectly clean, man." "No, I know it was you, Mike." This goes back and forth for some minutes until Ed's on-duty supervisor pulled up, lights also flashing. He stepped out, looking like an acting double for Dan Aykroyd. "Okay, Mike, why are you giving us a hard time? Ed caught you. Let's go." "Look, Rick, Mike began. "Ed says he's been chasing me through the mud and crap. I'm literally clean. Rick, I feel for you guys, but whoever it was y'all were chasing, it wasn't me." Having been presented with evidence that Mike was indeed clean and couldn't possibly have been running in creeks and streams for the past hour, Rick and Ed let Mike go. Everyone there knew Mike was guilty. As Mike walked off into the proverbial sunset, Ed and Rick knew they would get him eventually. When they finally did a couple of years later, Mike paid dearly for making them look like fools. Never worry, Mike is alive and well and continuing his anti-hero ways today.
People who separated or got divorced within 1 year of getting married, when did you know it was a mistake? Not me, but my dad. He got remarried after being divorced for about 5 years. I would have been all for it, but he met this woman in another state on a business trip and would travel up to see her every weekend after they hit it off. They knew each other for 6 months before getting engaged. The engagement was only for 3 months. My brother and I tried telling him about all the red flags, telling him to take his time. My dad is very well off financially, and we kept trying to teach him things were moving too quickly, that she was only in it for the money. She moved her whole family from their hometown to the city my dad lived in, including their elderly grandmother who needed constant medical supervision. Before they were even married, the pantry was full of Whole Foods brand food instead of the local grocery store, as was tradition. We had all new furniture, and the house had to be repainted, all at his bride-to-be's request. The marriage lasted all of 2 weeks. Apparently, my dad's bride had the gall to ask my dad to leave everything to her in the will, and write me and my brother out. Only then did he realize she was in it for the money. The next day, he had the marriage annulled. Someday, I'd like to know what it's like to fall so completely for someone that I don't recognize they're taking advantage of me. Must feel good for that instant before it all comes crashing down. When he choked me against a wall at a party, he was mad that I laughed at another guy's joke. People were passing by us, but just kind of looked and kept going. Lots of other stuff happened too, but it took me a while to wake up and break away. I was in denial for too long. Back in the early 1980s, I spent 6 years in the US Navy. In 1986, I was recruited to go into the US Army through a program for technical and intelligence-experienced military personnel to become warrant officers. All the Navy offered me was sea duty and more sea duty. It looked like a real good deal. I was engaged to a young lady 3 years my junior and had a bit more than $20,000 in savings. Everything looked promising with a new career and family life. The wedding went off without a hitch. I was looking at a vacation of about 3 months between exiting the Navy and entering training for the Army. It was when my recruiter contacted me over my security clearance that things went south. My credit report did not match my questionnaire. There was 3 credit cards with a $14,000 balance I didn't mention. It was no big deal, they weren't delinquent, but I needed to amend my answers to account for them. Turns out my wife had opened up a charge card at our bank, then got a couple of store cards around town. She had purchased some serious clothes and jewelry, but the real kicker? She had bought a horse. She had taken lessons as a child and decided this was going to be her new thing. There was the price of the animal, riding gear, saddle and tack, vet bills, stable fees, yada yada yada. I ended up dumping a big chunk of my savings into paying down these cards, then amending my questionnaire responses. She was from a very blue-collar family. They were very good people who worked hard for everything they had. But I don't think credit ratings and compound interest rates were much discussed at the dinner table. So I explained about credit cards, the huge interest rate, how long it would take me to pay one down, then about security clearances, and having a huge debt with no job would affect it. I treated all of this as a bump in our relationship, but things got dark real fast. My ship date was coming up, and things had to be done before I started training. I was in good physical shape, but I was facing boot camp, AIT, airborne school, ranger school, warrant officer selection, and advanced training. Basically 18 months of utter insanity. I was prepared for what I faced, but there was a lot that could go wrong. If I got through it, I was a warrant officer. But if I dropped the ball along the way, I would not only be enlisted, but junior enlisted in a job they would decide for me. In theory, I could end up a line cook in some chow hall at Camp Nowhere. About a week later, the phone rings. It's about the horse. No one was taking care of the animal or cleaning the stable or even feeding the poor thing. The stable had covered down for the sake of the animal, but we're now charging $350 a week for the extra services my wife was supposed to be doing. She was leaving our apartment every day, and I assumed it was for riding in care of the animal. And for the first week, she was. The second week, she was lawyer shopping. She wanted out. She must have gotten wind of what happened at the stable and didn't come home that night. The next day, I got served with papers. Total marriage time, 47 days. So I ended up with an apartment with 4 months on the lease, no car, and a horse. I found a new home for the horse. I had to defer my ship date and it took 14 months to settle the divorce. My security clearance was approved 2 days after the papers were filed. I shipped the next day. In the end, I had 2 pair of pants, 3 shirts, and a pair of shoes that had no business on anyone's feet. I was working 2 minimum wage jobs, 14 hours a day, paying down debt, lawyer's fees, rent, and sometimes eating to get by. I ended up at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, mowing lawns for 2 months as I shipped without a training slot for boot camp. I wasn't happy, but I was relieved. In airborne school, I met a cadet who was going to airborne school for her summer break. She had a year to go before her commission, and we hit it off. We'd get together on holidays, between training and long weekends. When I finished training and got my warrant, still a cadet, she flew across the country to give me my first salute. I gave her a silver dollar as per tradition. 2 months later, she received her commission, to which I saluted her and returned the silver dollar. Married that Christmas. We've been together for 31 years. Well, as horrible as it went the first time around, I'm glad you were able to find someone that worked with you. I knew a week after I got married when he slammed my head into the wall because he saw me looking at a man at an ice cream shop. I'm from the US and got married in England. This dude completely changed right after we got married. A couple of weeks later, I had to get out of there and come back to the US. I don't understand why this is such a thing, how you hear about people all of a sudden changing drastically after getting married. In this case, the guy got violent. Like, were you just holding it all in for a couple of years while you were dating and you think, now we're married so I can just let it all out? That's not how that works. You still have to continue to be a good person while you're married too. She nearly killed me because she thought I was cheating from some text that I sent to my mother. I was blindsided by it. We had lived together for a year, about an hour from my hometown. We relocated upon her request and desire to my hometown prior to our marriage, so that when we had kids, it's best to be close to family. We had a house we loved, a dog we loved, jobs we both loved working in. Or so I thought. Married in October. She goes to visit her sister over the next Labor Day weekend, and I can't attend due to work. Comes back the Tuesday after Labor Day and tells me she's living a lie and someone else's dream, and that she needs a divorce. I had no idea. The divorce was finalized in January. She married some dude that her sister was friends with, that she had met on that trip I was unable to attend. The following September. Life is wild sometimes. This one feels really bad because you were just completely blindsided by this. Sounds like this girl really doesn't know what she wants and is still kind of figuring it out. I'm sorry you had to go through that. On the honeymoon. We dated for 5 years, but on the honeymoon, we had a big argument over my liberal use of sunscreen. She refused to wear any because of chemicals, and I liberally use it due to my ginger skin. We seriously argued over this for a good hour, and she refused to even go into the pool with me because of the sunscreen chemicals. After a scuba adventure with her, she could barely walk because she got so burnt on her legs, whereas my skin didn't change. She then tried to convince me that it was all my fault, because I didn't force her to wear the sunscreen, and that the honeymoon was ruined. It was then that I realized I picked the wrong person. After a few more psycho arguments, mad at me because of something in her dreams, mad at me because I didn't bring an umbrella, I had to call it quits. I can't stay with someone who constantly blames me for their own problems. Luckily, no kids, and I got back everything I brought into the marriage. Weren't there warning signs before this though? Like, you say you were together for 5 years, and now all of a sudden on the honeymoon she's acting like this? You must have seen this behavior before. Not me, but my sister's friend. Her sister got engaged 8 months into a relationship and got married 4 months later. Everything went well the first 5 months, but the husband started acting different. He wasn't chatty, his good morning and good night kisses became dull, and things like that. Her sister would ask if everything was okay, and he would say, "I'm fine," every time. Her sister didn't want to push him, so she waited for him to talk about what's bothering him. One evening, after eating dinner, the husband said he wanted to talk about their relationship. Before he could talk about it, he started crying. He cried for a few minutes and then told her he's gay. The sister filed for divorce, and after the divorce was settled, she wasn't really mad at him anymore. So she went to see him and forgave him. They became good friends, and the sister helped him become comfortable with his sexuality. She even helped him come out to his close friends and then to his family. 5 years later, the sister is now engaged to another man and expecting their first child. The ex-husband is now very happily married to a man for almost a year now. I'm glad we got one nice happy ending out of all of these. She went out for a girls' night and met a new friend named Nicole at a bar. She started texting her a lot, then going to hang out now and then. We had a baby at home and she kept trying to go hang out with this girl from another town over with no last name who I was not allowed to meet. His real name was Wesley. Ouch. I kind of thought she was going to turn out to be a lesbian, not gonna lie. I'd been fooling around with this girl for a while. I never wanted anything serious, and I knew that from the start. Then my mom was killed. I went into a deep depression, and this girl was there for me. Her mom had died of cancer about a year earlier, and I guess we really bonded over that. It pushed us much further emotionally than we ever should have gone. We ended up doing a courthouse marriage. I knew within the first month that I had messed up, but I didn't want to just give up and get divorced. Once the emotions of my mom's death passed, I realized how toxic she really was. She was an incredibly unstable person and ended up taking me into an even deeper depression. We divorced about a year ago after being married for about 10 months, and I was immediately much happier. Marriage shouldn't be taken lightly, but people also shouldn't force themselves to be in unhealthy relationships. We all make mistakes. Don't waste your life with someone that doesn't deserve you. It can be hard to end a relationship for a lot of different reasons. Something like this, I really do understand. You were both in a tough place and needed each other for support, but you just took it further than it was ever really meant to go. My sister got a civil marriage, then they moved super far away to the middle of nowhere because he got a good job. My sister never finished college, and he would remind her on a daily basis about it. She would get super depressed, and he wouldn't believe her. She got sick once, and he told her that since she didn't go to the DMV that day, she wasn't allowed to go to a theme park we were planning on going to that weekend. He would demean her whenever she couldn't get a job, or even an interview, and she applied to practically everywhere within a 50-mile radius. He called her stupid in front of me, and when I called him out, he told me to mind my own business. If he wasn't twice my size, I would have decked him. She left him after about a year because he's obviously a raging jerk. When she left, he told her she has nowhere to go, and if she went to stay with our mom, she would just be a burden like me. I was 19 and in college at the time. He's a rude jerk, but at least she got the car and the dog. This dude sounds like more of a waste of skin than he was ever accusing her of being. A cousin of mine divorced her husband after 6 months. She knew when we had to pick her up from her home after having been recently beaten. That day, we packed up all her stuff and never let her go back. The day after we got married, he slapped me across the face, hard and completely out of the blue. No argument, no conversation leading up to it, nothing. He said it wasn't that hard of a hit, and he was just joking around and I was being dramatic. He had never gotten violent with me while dating, but as soon as we got married, it was like a switch flipped, and he was a completely different person. It got worse very quickly, and I ended up filing for divorce 73 days after we got married. My mother-in-law got married for the first time when she was really young. Left him a month later. Turns out he was a raging alcoholic. She had no idea because her family was super overprotective, and they were never really allowed to spend time together alone before they got married. Who knew that spending time with someone could be the key to knowing if they're a good partner? That's why I could never get behind the idea of an arranged marriage. The whole thing just sounds crazy to me. Not within a year, but about 18 months. She was constantly complaining she didn't have friends after moving in with me, joined a local soccer team, and she talked about one teammate non-stop for months. I had a bad feeling about it from the get-go, but she assured me they were just friends, and how dare I not trust her. I thought I was going crazy because my gut told me something wasn't right, but I was punishing myself for being a bad husband and not trusting my wife. Turns out it was all true. She'd been screwing the teammate for months. She was most likely screwing someone else during our engagement. We officially split amicably as of last week without any mess, thank God. A cousin of mine married someone who seemed like the perfect woman. They worked in the same store together, and he would brag about how his wife was getting promoted quickly in the company. A few months into the marriage, she tells him she's going out with friends for the evening. An hour or so later, my cousin gets a call from one of his friends. The friend saw her having dinner in a restaurant with the manager of the store that they both worked at. Once he confronted her about it, that was basically the end of the marriage. I mean, if she's not a great worker, then her getting all those promotions might have been an earlier clue. I got married in late May. By August or September, I found out from my dad that my husband, now ex, and my brother's wife were sending some inappropriate texts back and forth. She was also my bridesmaid at my wedding. She felt guilty and told my dad, who had to tell me. I forgave him like a dingus, and about a year and a half later, I found pictures of him fooling around with 2 different guys in our house, and also wearing quite a bit of my nice makeup. Of course, all of this after we moved to Washington from Florida. It's been wild, but we're obviously divorced now. Whoa, so this dude was just willing to fool around with anyone, it sounds like. My brother died a week after the wedding, and after about 2 months, he told me that was just too big of a thing to happen in the beginning of a marriage. I tried for 6 more months and then just gave up. It's really sad to hear that the husband couldn't find it in them to be able to support their new wife through a very hard time. This has got to be one of the most selfish things I've ever heard. You'd committed to spending your entire life with someone. Something goes bad in the first week and you're out? I can't begin to understand. A couple of weeks into our marriage, anytime we would fool around, it started to physically hurt. I went to my OB for a test or 2. She informed me that I had contracted chlamydia. That's when I knew. Turns out my newlywed husband had been banging his coworker for months. The day after the wedding, when he poked me in the chest and said, "You're gonna do what I say whether you like it or not." Big mistake. I feel like this one could have been playful, but obviously you're the judge of his tone, and it sounds like he wasn't being playful and being serious. In which case, yeah, screw that guy. Best girlfriend I'd had to date at the time. I was in my late 30s and had never been married. Dated for about a year. We got married, and shortly after, she asked to have her name on all of my assets. A few rental houses, the current house, some financial instruments, the cars, and things like that. Not a problem since we're married, I thought. But on a Wednesday, she insisted that it be done by that Friday. I didn't have time to do that because work and a deadline. I could start it the next week, I said. She pitched a fit and said if I loved her, I would do it by Friday. I found this strange and decided not to start it and see what happened. She moved out of our bedroom into a guest room, got cold around the house, told me she would move back into our bedroom when I finished getting everything done. At this point, I thought, bull, and told her so. I went to my family lawyer to seek advice. She advised me not to put anything in her name at this point. Gave me the name of a marriage counselor. She didn't want to go to counseling. She continued to live in the guest room. I took my lawyer's advice and did nothing about the assets. The long and the short of it was that after 1 year of marriage, when on our anniversary, she told me I didn't have her in my heart. I thought to myself, this is bull. About a week after that, I told her if this was the way it's gonna be, I'm not gonna be married like this. She then told me, okay, so what are you gonna give me? Yes, she said that. I consulted my lawyer on what a judge would come up with regarding community property for the past year. Number came up to 20G. I took that number and added another 20 grand and proposed that to her so we can make it easy. I was gonna spend way more than that in lawyer fees if it got ugly. It got ugly. A week later, I got served with papers. With all said in the complaint, when added up, she was going after $750K for 1 year of marriage, 1 year of divorce proceedings, and 2 years of property settlement proceedings on what should have been a 2-hour problem. Judgment came. 215 points in the judgment. I owed her what would have been the community property, about 20 grand, but awarded me attorney's fees. So in the net, she owed me about 30 grand and left her to go buy her own car. Turns out this judge had worked her butt off through school to become a lawyer, and the same to become a judge by 40 years old. I was told by another attorney that normally this judge never gives attorney's fees, but was so peeved off at the gold dig my wife had attempted that she felt it was justified in this case. Even though I came out okay financially, it was an emotional train wreck to have this happen and go through all that. It's been 15 years since it happened. I was not dateable for about 2 years, but now very happy with who I am and who I'm with. Thank God you were able to have a judge that was able to see through this woman's bull. The fact that she ended up having to give you a bunch of money in return just makes it even better.
Who is the most hated person in your workplace and why? Current job is a bore on this subject, so we'll go to my last. Tim was the guy everybody hated. He was lucky we all felt bad for his quirks. Every working day, Tim punched in at exactly 8 a.m. and out at 5 p.m. In between those hours, you were lucky if you saw him working. It was because of him we no longer had Secret Santa during the holidays, catered monthly lunches, or holiday bonuses. Secret Santa. Tim was quite frugal, and when I say quite, I mean he was cheap. Every employee in the company voted the dollar amount they wanted to spend on another for the Secret Santa. The average dollar amount came out to $50. Tim's vote was $1. I recognized his crappy handwriting. Everyone, including Tim, agreed to spend around that dollar amount. When it came down to opening presents, it was clear everybody went over that amount. Tim received a pair of tickets to a Dodgers baseball game, plus some Dodgers t-shirts, a hat, and the tickets were face valued at $175 each. His Secret Santa had season tickets and gifted him a pair from a set. When it came down for Tim to give his gift, I wondered who he got. He got his desk buddy. Jessie was the sweetest girl in the office. She worked with everyone and was the most polite, respectful, soft-spoken human I've ever met. When she opened her gift, I wanted to die. He got her lingerie. Not just any lingerie, crotchless, matching bra, and without any tags. Jessie was 5'9" and athletic. Whoever those clothes were for was someone athletically challenged. HR had a heyday with that one. Catered lunch. The last Friday of every month featured catered lunch with a short workday. It always revolved so that things never felt redundant. Mexican, Italian, barbecue, pizza, or Chinese. Tim religiously ate Mexican food. When the chosen Mexican restaurant was catering, Tim was first in line to eat. He would wait around the time clock near the patio doors so that when 1 p.m. hit, his hand was being scanned with 1 foot out the door. When it was any of the other catered meals, he made it known that he was irritated that so-and-so were catering. May 2013, I got to choose what we were having, and I chose Italian, since my birthday was the following day. Tim was seriously mad about having Italian food. Mind you, for the next 2 months, the choices were either Italian or Chinese, so Mexican was nowhere near the table. Eventually, everyone heard a bit of his ramblings, and then it hit the ears of the company chairman. They called the heads of every department in and asked about Tim's feeling and how long this had gone on for. I explained how Tim was a quirky guy, but for some reason only liked Mexican food. Next morning, there was an announcement that we were no longer having company lunches. This meant no more going home at 2 p.m. and no more lunch for the office. Everyone was angry. Holiday bonuses. This is what got the ball rolling for Tim's demise. Our company manufactured steel products and shipped them to different distribution warehouses. Nobody in our office worked in sales, so nobody had commission-based pay. Every year, before our 2-week holiday vacation, we received our last checks for the year and a bonus. The bonus was a percentage of the profits divided up between all employees. It was great. Who doesn't like more money right before the holiday season? Tim, that's who. This particular year had been a bad one for us. Profits were down 10% due to one of our distributors filing for bankruptcy. So our bonuses were not as big as before, but they still equated to a paycheck's value. Everyone, other than Tim, was ecstatic that they were still receiving bonuses. When Tim opened his check, heck broke loose. I've never seen someone so angry about a bonus check in my life. First, he goes around asking everyone how much they received. We all received the same amount, but nobody wanted to show him their check. Then he tries to talk to his deskmates about receiving less than last year, and this is where it goes downhill. Everyone he asks tells him that they received more than last year's amount. You can see where this is going now. After everyone's gone for the day and a few of us stay to clean up the holiday party mess, Tim rushes the company owner and lays into him on why he received a lower bonus, that he feels undervalued, he should be asking for a raise. We can hear him yell through a closed window to the outside. The holidays pass, and Tim is as happy as ever. All department heads get called into what seemed like a normal Monday after the holiday meeting, and we're told the yearly bonus structure will no longer continue at our branch. Everybody knew why. A month later, Jesse finally got him fired after bringing light to several inappropriate harassment instances revolving around Tim. Last I heard, he moved to Kansas to live closer to his family. Edit. Wow, this really took off with a few people. Before the new year, I was already in exit plan mode after an acceptance at a larger company. I made it clear with the owners months beforehand so they weren't shocked. March 2014, I officially left, which was about a month after Tim. Many of my coworkers were older than me and could basically be my parents if you looked at the ages, so I didn't have an outside work relationship with anyone. However, I Facebook messaged an old coworker who's still there to get some updates for you guys. I'll update once I have new information. Update. So looks like everything is back to normal and the company chairman reinstated all the perks. Right after Tim was fired, the department heads had a meeting with the chairman and concluded Tim was the issue to all of this. The chairman agreed to reinstate the bonus structure, and now when Mexican food is ordered, there are always leftovers to take home. A bonus story. The coworker I talked to was called by a competing company as a reference for Tim a few years back. It just so happened that he answered the phone and worked the appropriate department. After a few weeks, the hiring agent called him back thanking him for his answers and that Tim didn't make it through the probationary period. He was the worst candidate they had that was the most qualified on paper. He didn't believe Tim lasted all the years we had him. In the 2 weeks he was there, he managed to tick off every coworker there. Amazing Tim. Won't name names in case this comes back to me, but he's a level 3 engineer who does absolutely nothing all day. He'll book a conference room and sit in the dark for hours. He'll sit at his desk and do actually nothing except exist. But his team, which he did not assemble and which he does not actually lead, is good enough to make him look good, so he keeps getting more responsibility. I work in a small chiropractic clinic. 3 chiropractors, 4 receptionists, 2 per shift. One of the receptionists literally does nothing but check patients in. We are supposed to work on billing and other tasks to do with insurance. She always leaves her Facebook logged in into the communal computers, so I like a bunch of dank meme Facebook pages for her. The woman who would use money from our pooled tip jar to fix her pricing mistakes, literally stealing money from her coworkers to cover her butt. We all hated her. My mom works in a coffee shop and the manager will regularly take staff tips to cover any till discrepancies. Not only illegal, but a total jerk move, because the tips are pooled monthly and divided so it affects staff who weren't even in at the time. Edit. I was incorrect. This is totally legal. It's still a jerk move. If a national chain can't swallow a loss of £2 when the markup on a cup of coffee is almost twice that and punishes the staff, well, screw them. Once the manager accidentally ordered 2 cakes. Only one was sold and the other went out of date. He refused to have it on his wastage, denied making the error, and took £75 out of the staff tips for that 1 cake alone because that was the resale cost. Makes me heave. My boss's wife has been given a position of authority over my department, despite having no experience or expertise in the area. But the worst part is, she is an older lady and by all accounts seems to be suffering from dementia/Alzheimer's. Every single email you send her or email chain she's included on, she will respond without having any understanding of what was written to her. So then you have to spend the time explaining the whole content of the chain or email to her. We have to attend meetings with her where she will spend a lot of time rambling about things that have nothing to do with our work. We have to remind her or re-explain things that we talked about at the last meeting that are relevant because she doesn't remember or understand. Then the whole thing happens all over again in the next interaction with her, like it's Groundhog Day for her. We have this goober of a guy who works probably 1 full day a week. I actually get surprised if I don't have an email in my inbox the morning of saying he won't be in. Worst of all, though, he sits nearest to the bathroom and makes comments like, "Wow, you were in there a long time. Must have been in number 2," when people come out. Worked for an attorney who was almost never in the office. And I'm not talking like she was in court or meeting clients outside the office. She just wouldn't show up. She missed calls and appointments all the time, but I get written up for missing a few days because my babies got sick and then I got sick. She was a jerk for other reasons too, but she was hypocritical on top of it. There was a time she didn't come in for 2 weeks, and she argued with me about it, and I asked her to show me on the calendar when she came in. She couldn't. She did not remain a partner for very long. We have a dude who rolls in at 10 and leaves at 2, 3 or 4 days each week. He has a different supervisor than us that works in another office even though he's on our team. So infuriating. We've talked to our boss so many times about him, but she can't do anything. Screw him. Edit. Many people don't like me for this, claiming that he gets plenty of work done in his time I see him. I'd like to say that's not true. He pawns off hours of work per week on us. That's why it's a problem. George the Joiner. Minimal number of fingers, bad personal hygiene, unintelligibly thick accent. This is not a man you want operating a forklift, operating machinery, or driving. If he carries something through the workshop, it's a safe bet that he will utterly destroy something with his own brand of half-blind ignorance. But what a man. Mysterious and enigmatic. Who is he? Where did he come from? When will he go back? Find out next time on Dragon Ball Z! Far and away, the most hated person in my carpentry shop is the deaf guy. I've only been working there a year, and everyone thinks he is the most vindictive, hateful, selfish, paranoid jerkwad to walk the earth. He's easily the hardest worker there. I can tell you with confidence that he has generated the most money for the company of anyone there. He absolutely owns his portion of the shop. He has it down like clockwork and doesn't waste a second. All that being said, he throws an absolute rabid fit whenever anything out of routine happens, and he won't look anyone in the eye, and he calls everyone lazy jerkwads. After a month of working there, I started to learn American Sign Language. I learned a few things at home and would say anything that I could to him. Happy Monday, how are you, etc. I learned how to ask about words, how to spell things, how to sign numbers. Pretty soon he's teaching me a word a day, then it speeds up to 3 to 5 words a day. Fast forward a year, and we talk constantly. What I learned is that he gets mad because he's been passed up for promotions because he's deaf. People don't tell him overtime is available when it's what he wants. He sees people coming in late and still taking breaks, and he never breaks those rules. He gets mad that no one ever tells him about new machines being bought or new jobs coming in or the gossip. I unknowingly became his liaison. He stopped fighting with people. He's able to get all of the jokes we tell at lunch because I can translate. Other people are learning sign language as time goes on too. What I don't get is why no one ever gave him the benefit of the doubt. It would suck to be deaf and never know what was going on. Some people have worked with him for 15 years, and no one has ever learned any ASL. He thanked me recently for being a good friend. He said things are a lot better now. Edit, one guy in the shop did learn some sign language, all of the insults and swear words. Not working there anymore, but I had one coworker, call him Roy, who was a POS. We worked in IT support, and Roy was considered the quote-unquote expert for a certain system our team managed. He was supposed to train me, but he only taught me the very basic stuff. He never told me about the plethora of problems that can occur with the system. When alerts did happen, which I had no idea what they were or how to respond to, he would chastise me and throw me under the bus. There was another incident where the boss didn't trust him to come in for an overtime shift, so I was asked to come in at a certain time to cover. I called Roy first thing in the morning and asked if he would come in. He said he would, so I went in at my normal time. Roy doesn't show, and I'm forced to work 10 hours that day to cover his lazy butt. Surprisingly, the incident didn't get him fired, but he did proudly announce he found himself a new job a month later. The new job rescinded their offer, and he went into survival mode. He deliberately continued to train me poorly to make himself, quote, unreplaceable, but the company refused to let him stay, and that was the end of it. Coworker who talks way too dang much. I can make conversation with my coworkers, but we all have a sense of when it's appropriate. She's the kind of person who bombards me with chatter as soon as I walk in, before I've even taken off my jacket. She tries to make conversation out of everything, to the point where it gets really annoying because it happens so frequently. I was really swamped with stuff the other day, and she stopped me just to point out that a customer's last name was one letter different from her own maiden name. Isn't it amazing? No, Carol, it's not. S constantly eats throughout the day, but to do this, he must take several trips to the canteen to acquire food. But on the way to the canteen, it starts with at least a 20-minute cigarette break. Complains heavily if anyone asks him to do anything, as he is always too busy. We have flexi-time at work, so he gets in early, and on the odd time I have turned up early, the office lights are always off. Apparently prefers working in the dark. Becomes deeply offended at any change in the office, and the temperature must be kept cold as he can't work if it's too warm. Can't stand the coffee addicts in the office as they need caffeine but drink several bottles of Coca-Cola every day. I've been in the office now for nearly 2 years, still yet to work out what he actually does. He smells, he's sweaty, and when he sneezes, he wipes his nose with his hand and then he cleans it off on the desk. I hate S, and so do the rest of us. Edit, I have no problem with working in the dark, but as an IT department, I feel it is better to do work with eyes open and the PC on, and not having the office door locked. I don't mind wearing my coat all year round in the office, gloves in winter, but I do feel a compromise could be met. I'm not asking for a sauna. Our most hated person is a troll who survives off cigarettes, Diet Pepsi, and the souls she drains, mine included. Some of her greatest hits, telling me I am not getting any younger, therefore my babies would be, quote, our word, her word, not mine, telling a delightful tale of how she once snuck in pork into a Muslim's diet, going on about her husband's pension and how she doesn't have to work, she just works for the fun of it, yet she bums smokes and bus fare off people half her age. She lives to get anyone into trouble, yet she's incompetent herself, and when she's called on it, she says, to err is human. Every week she threatens to quit, but nowhere would have her. To err is human, but to be a piece of garbage is divine. You know those rows of staples you put in a stapler? He takes 2 of those, faces them against each other, and rubs them between his fingers all day. It may be worse than nails on a chalkboard, and he will not stop for everyone. Let me tell those of you who scrolled down this far about Supervisor Chef Bob. We all hated Bob. Bob wasn't a team player, you see. When we were swamped, everyone would skip breaks except for Bob. We would all help whoever was falling behind except Bob. Bob did his own thing and left you to the wolves. Bob always pointed out what you did wrong or what you did lazily. Eventually, Bob started helping me a little when I would fall behind. I thanked him once for grilling a steak for one of my orders, and I made the mistake of telling him that steaks are my weak spot. I had trouble overcooking them. For weeks after that, he arranged it so I cooked every freaking steak. Time passes and I became, not to brag, one of the competent employees. I noticed one night that Bob was jumping in to help me whenever I fell behind. He would even ask what I wanted him to cover. Once I was working with him and I noticed Brenda was falling behind. Brenda is always falling behind. I was clear for a minute and told Bob that I was going to help Brenda for a minute. Bob said no. Brenda has to learn how to do her job. She won't learn if we always do it for her. And I saw Bob in a whole new light. He wasn't lazy. He just wanted us all to know our jobs. Once he knew anyone could handle anything, then he was quick to help out. He was, he admitted to me once, very bad at remembering who had taken breaks. He had no problem covering for a break. We just had to ask him instead of waiting forever for him to tell us to go. Now, Bob is gone. I was genuinely sad to see him go. Standards have fallen, and Brenda is still incapable of doing her job. A girl recently promoted to be a, quote, interim education director position, but she fails to leave out the interim part when introducing herself. She brings her untrained, disobedient dog to work, wears highly inappropriate clothing to a job working with kids, tells people they have to respect her because she's a director, leaves her desk a mess, makes every story about her, willfully ignores safety protocols if she doesn't have time for them, had fatherly nicknames for the old boss, sat on the boss's lap at the Christmas party kissing him on the cheek, and smiles like Ted Cruz. Why was that the part that got me? He is no longer working with us, but he is still legendary to this day. Since he is most likely on Reddit, I will refer to him as Magoo. Magoo and I both started at the same time in a science-based company, but in different departments. He looked really good on paper, well qualified, and interviewed fairly well, from what I was told. I sat next to him and we began chatting. It became pretty apparent that something was off on him. He would giggle to himself during the conversation and immediately began one-upping me in the conversation, saying how he had something better or knew more about what we were talking about. Not a big deal. I work with scientists and engineers, being one myself, and odd personalities are the norm. Within a day or two, I knew that I was not going to enjoy my time with Magoo. Our office has a tradition of getting bagels and cream cheese every Friday as a sort of reward for a long week. I get in at 8:30, Magoo is already munching happily on a loaded bagel and giggling to himself. Not a big deal either. I get my bagel, start working, Redditing, and head to the bathroom an hour later. I can see as I'm walking that Magoo is eating another bagel. Not cool, but I've gotten two myself from time to time if there are plenty left. 15 minutes later, I see Magoo eating another bagel and trying to sneak off with it. I confront him and tell him you can't eat 3 bagels before some people have had one. He brushes it off and tries to pretend like he didn't know he had done it. This guy is in his 30s, by the way. Magoo's interests were wide and varied. Think being a part of esoteric clubs, makes his own gaming computers and brags about it. The worst part of being around him is that he takes over every conversation he is in, and he is in every conversation. He will literally walk up to a group of people, no matter what they are talking about, laughing like he heard something funny, and then interject with how he knows more about it or is an expert at it. It got to the point that we would avoid him at all costs, or just leaving when he came around. Didn't matter to Magoo, he would follow you and talk about his knowledge anyway. Magoo is also a closed-eye talker. You know who I'm talking about. The kind of person who will smugly assume he knows more about what you are saying and will close his eyes and turn his head away in an exasperated measure of, I can't believe I have to explain this, manner. He began to get on everyone's nerves, but began getting bolder with his interjections. He interrupted the CEO of our company during an important meeting to correct him on a detail that didn't matter. The balls on this guy. He also began changing login details, since he knew a good bit on computers, for shared machines for sequencing and changing protocols without getting approval. He ordered over $10,000 in materials for an experiment that wasn't authorized to answer something he had been wondering about, not even related to what we were doing. The last straw is when he started insulting people if they disagreed with him, including his boss. At this point, most people wouldn't even respond to him when he spoke to them, and most people just left when he came around, even in mid-sentence. How he lasted 3 months is beyond me, but the day he was fired, we were told to stay out of the offices in case he did anything drastic. After he was gone, he asked his boss for a reference. I still like to check up on Magoo every now and again. He is still unemployed and probably has no idea why. Edit, Magoo, if you are reading this, I hope that you are doing well. Please know that I tried hard to like you, but you need to let other people say things, even if they are wrong, without telling them what you know. I also hope that you find a job. No person deserves to feel unwanted or that they don't deserve success. Hopefully you can reevaluate how you treat people and have a few slices of humble pie. You can have some cool hobbies, even if you told me about them with your eyes closed.
Gynecologists and OBs. What is the most mind-blowing thing a husband or boyfriend has said? Story from my internship. Checked a woman who was not progressing in labor and thought, that's not a head. Sure enough, the baby was breech. She was a very tiny woman, and this was a large baby, so it was pretty clear that she would need a C-section. She was a recent immigrant from a small third-world country, didn't have a partner with her, and spoke absolutely no English. Unfortunately, nobody in the unit spoke her language. I tried my best to mime and explain what was happening and what we were recommending. She nodded yes, but I had a strong sense she didn't understand the explanation. We sent somebody down to housekeeping and the cafeteria, hoping we could find any hospital staff who could translate. Fortunately, we found someone able to translate. It turns out that she understood the baby was breech, but that she thought we would have to literally cut her open and kill her in order to save the baby. Her relief and joy when she finally understood what the plan was something I won't forget. The staff member from housekeeping was wonderful and stayed to support her until she went into the OR. My mum was a general practitioner. She once had a 15-year-old girl come in who had a pregnancy test show positive, but was adamant that she couldn't be pregnant. My mum confirmed the pregnancy, but the girl still refused to believe it was true. She went on to explain to my mum it was impossible for her to get pregnant because her boyfriend had told her that if she laid completely still during the deed, then she wasn't technically doing it and couldn't get pregnant. I was kind of refraining from commenting on any of these stories until I read this crap. This is the kind of loophole you use with the church, not with your doctor, and I can't stop laughing. I worked in a pharmacy and we noticed that a 16-year-old girl was coming back in to pick up her birth control exactly 2 weeks early every month. This was immediately flagged as strange because BC comes in a convenient package that makes it easy to keep track of the daily dose and birth control. It's not really a drug that people hustle to try to get as many pills as they can. Like Xanax, say. After a few months of this, the pharmacist confronted her and learned that every day she took her pill and her boyfriend did too. After Googling what happens when men take birth control, I'm morbidly curious as to how many months this happened for, because the boyfriend in question was probably undergoing some interesting changes as a result. When my wife was delivering our third child, a VBAC, I asked the doctor as a joke, "Can I be the one who chews the umbilical cord in half?" And he looked at me with a distant look and said, "Yeah, I guess." After several complications and several hours, a beautiful girl was in the world and the doctor said, "Okay, Daddy, get down on the floor and chew this cord in two if you're ready." Yeah, I didn't do it. I'm a nurse and helped deliver this girl's first baby. I was still in school at the time. She was like 19, I think. The father, who was obviously much older, was also in the room. After the baby was born, everyone was all excited and emotional, except for the father, who was just like, and shrugged it off. I worked in a diagnostic center. The gynecologist refers a patient for a hoo-ha ultrasound to find out why she's having fertility issues. The techie inserts the probe, woman flinches in pain, the tech asks if it hurts during adult fun times. The woman explains her husband doesn't insert it into the hoo-ha. No, here, while pointing to her belly button. The tech came out red-faced. She had to call the doctor and explain why the patient was having trouble getting pregnant. This happened twice at this clinic. Twice. ER nurse here had a 19-year-old woman come in for abdominal pain. She had 2 kids and was pregnant again. She said she was not happy to be pregnant again, but she didn't want to break up with her boyfriend. I thought the boyfriend may have been abusive or not letting her use birth control or something, so I closed the door and asked her some questions. Turns out she didn't know that banging caused babies. Her life skills class consisted of get boyfriend/married and the babies arrive, with no other details, so she thought once you had a boyfriend, babies were automatic and doing the deed was just a fun thing to do. We had a long talk. I'm not an OB, but work at an L&D hospital. In a note for our patient, there was one from a previous office visit that said, "Chief complaint, husband concerned about wife's weight gain during pregnancy." She was actually under the weight she needed to be at during that time. Seeing Mum back in the office for her 2-week follow-up after delivery to remove stitches. She had a tear that needed repair, only to find out that the stitches were gone. Turns out hubby took them out because they were bothering him when they were getting intimate. My mother is an OB-GYN. She did a manual hoo-ha exam for a woman, and the husband asked her with an angry tone of voice if there was any other way of doing the exam besides her using her fingers, because he didn't like her putting fingers in his wife. Not an OB, but when I was in med school, I was seeing a pregnant teen who was convinced she couldn't be pregnant. I asked if she was getting intimate with anyone, and she said yes. I asked if she used any kind of contraception, and she said no. However, she said that her boyfriend told her he couldn't get pregnant because he got kicked in the balls. A lot. Not an OB, but I work in an ER, and we had a 22-year-old woman come in a while back. I asked her what she was there for, and she said, "I found a hole." Like an abscess? I found a hole. Okay, is it a wound? Does it hurt? No, it's just a hole. It's a black hole. I 100% didn't understand what she was talking about and knew that I wouldn't get any more info from her at the check-in desk, so I gave her the bracelet and sent her to the triage nurse who had the same conversation with her. She didn't specify anything beyond, "Look, it's just a hole." It was her hoo-ha. I can't… What? 22? How? How did this person get this far? There are so many things that should have happened in her life to enlighten her as to the nature of her anatomy. My goodness. Growing up, my mother was very strict and religious, and girls were forbidden from looking or talking about down there. Could be a similar situation? I was working with a girl who hadn't been married very long, and who hadn't had a period since the one right before her wedding. She had told her older sister, and she had told her she needed to find out if she was pregnant. So she went to the doc, and it was confirmed that she was. She pulls me in the back room so no one else can hear, and she tells me, and I tell her congratulations. She says she has a question for me. She's peeing just fine now, but how will she pee when the baby gets bigger? Won't it block the urine? We worked in a library. I went right out to the stacks and got her a book on anatomy and another on pregnancy. I found the pages on the genitourinary system, and we sat in the break room while I read the one for females with her and explained it like it was a storybook. I was so furious that no one had told her a damned thing. On my OB rotation, husband said, "Holy crap," as the baby crowned, vagaled, passed out and hit his head on the bedside table on his way down, and had to be admitted to the same hospital his wife was having the baby at. She ended up getting discharged before he did. I definitely gave a story to the nurse who was taking care of my wife and I after our second kid. Having been going through labor all day, only being on liquids, and not giving birth till almost 9 at night, we were relaxing, relative term, with the nurse holding the baby when I turned to ask the nurse a question. She pauses, turns away, turns back to me, and responds with, "Not anytime soon." Disappointed, I tried to ask for more specifics, because I'd casually asked, "When can my wife have snacks?" And that was a pretty nondescript answer for someone who hadn't eaten in 12 hours. Turns out she thought I was asking when my wife and I can have adult fun times together again. After a good laugh, the correct answer was a couple of hours. I can't imagine what was going through her head before the clarification. Work in IM, but a patient's partner not wanting us to reveal an HIV diagnosis to a patient was definitely a low point for me, though where I work it's probably a stretch to even call that surprising. Back in my ER days, a young teenage patient came in with pregnancy-type symptoms. Of course, pregnancy test was positive, and appeared utterly shocked she was pregnant. I asked her if she was intimate with a partner. Yes. Do you use protection? No. Because? No. She still seemed surprised this had happened to her. Mom is an ob-gyn. She called a patient over to tell us she was HIV positive. The patient said, "I knew it," to which my mom asked how and why. Turns out the husband had been HIV positive for years, and they'd decided never to speak about it and have unprotected fun times for 5 years. This is what it costs to shirk responsibility and look the other way. In other words, idiot tax. Last month, a dad asked one of our OBs for an extra stitch during his wife's repair after delivery. Her immediate response was, "Exactly how small do you need it to be, sir?" Fricking legend on our unit now. Spread this so it can become the standard response to this all-too-common statement. I'm not an OB or GYN, however I am a flight medic who has delivered 3 babies. I'll never forget any of them. The second baby I delivered was about 5 weeks early, roadside, in East Jesus nowhere. The family had gone camping in the desert and Mum went into labor. By the time we arrived, there was no turning back and baby's head was visible. Mum was sort of squatting with her forearms on the middle row of seats in a van and her booty was aimed out the door. She was clothed in a loose dress. Just as she was pushing the head out, Dad said, Wait, we might get blood on the floor." Mum rounded on him with the biggest death glare and said, "Frick, your mom's van." That became a unit motto. Yeah, frick your mum's van, silly dude. Your wife is delivering your baby. If your mum asks you to reupholster her vehicle hot on the heels of this, she's officially a few Fruit Loops short of a bowl. Sister is a nurse in the mum/baby unit who will also work in labor and delivery. One dad asked for a C-section so her hoo-ha wouldn't be ruined. Another dad asking for her to be stitched up extra tight after the delivery. Another dad that couldn't seem to keep his clothes on during their entire stay. The nurses had to have multiple conversations with him to keep his clothes on. He just kept stripping and walking around, like he'd go out to the coffee station in the hall with only his tighty-whities on, and he'd be buck nude in the hospital room. We had to ask him to wear pants and a shirt when in the hall, and at minimum pants in the hospital room. No, he wasn't even trying to do the deed with her. Not a physician, but I do work in obstetrics. We had a code OB called on the overhead, which means a delivery is happening elsewhere in the hospital, and the team needs to get there stat. A woman's husband was worried about getting a parking ticket, so figured he would park in one of the massive parking garages and then walk up to the door as she's literally giving birth. They obviously didn't make it, and she delivered in the car. They were extremely religious, and to prevent her body from being exposed to what could potentially be a male doctor, they kept her pants on the whole time. Baby, placenta, and all were just chilling in this woman's pants. It was horrifying. Baby and mum were okay in the end. Dad is a 30-plus year OB and gynecologist, now retired. He tells a story of a hyper-religious couple, Muslim, who came in about difficulty getting pregnant. He examined the woman alone and discovered that she was actually an intersex person. Male gonads, undistended, no uterus, normal hoo-ha. The woman was mortified to learn this at 18. She feared her husband would be violent, believing he had been being gay by doing the deed with her. My dad gave her the option to call the police or ask for help. He and the nurses gave her phone numbers for counseling and offered discretion when talking to the spouse. She declined everything and asked that they tell the husband together. The man was super upset and they eventually left the office, both in tears. Dad never saw her again and wonders what happened. Multiple people are asking the question, how did she not recognize something was wrong when she missed her period for multiple years? I'd asked this question myself to my dad as well. The answer, if I recall correctly, was that she did experience mild and intermittent menstruation-like symptoms, cramps, bleeding, etc., but they were very far apart and in hindsight completely unrelated to actual menstruation. She was from a rural community and never sought medical attention due to, who knows, money, fear, and the fact that she was otherwise completely healthy, I presume. I remember him saying that the marriage was arranged, and I'm sure her side of the fam were probably apprehensive about fertility issues. These are tricky situations. My grandpa was a surgeon, private practice, and in the army. Toward the end of his life, we discussed some of the crazy things he did and saw. He told me he operated on a man with 2 tumors in his abdomen. Turned out to be fully developed ovaries. He had fully functioning gonads, no hoo-ha or tubes, etc. Grandpa told him the tumors were successfully removed. The human body is a crazy thing. Back in my OB rotation in med school, we had a pregnant woman who was super morbidly obese with a BMI in the 70s. During her prenatal visit, the resident was asking about her pregnancy history, past difficulty with fertility and conception, problems with the pregnancy so far, etc. Pretty standard stuff as I understand at the time. Husband then chimed in about the conception. Turns out they had no trouble conceiving. He then went into detail about how the conception went and blew my little inexperienced mind. Basically, the wife's mother and sister had to help with the conception by holding the wife's thighs out of the way enough so that he could get in to do the job. I still don't have words. Not anything a husband or boyfriend said, but still an interesting story. I once took care of a patient who had a baby as a virgin. She was a very religious woman who was saving her virginity for marriage. She told me she never met the right man and she was ready to have the baby as she was getting older. She was in her early 40s, so she had the IVF done and had a baby while also being a virgin. Not an OB-GYN, but a med student. In one of my rotations, I had an encounter with a father who wanted us to make his wife only reproduce male children by some drugs or procedure. Our head used to tell us that I can tell if it's a boy or girl by only seeing the expressions of the fathers and relatives in the clinical rounds. You're allowed to guess, my country. I missed 2 minutes ago when I didn't know any of this. Me too, anonymous Reddit user, me too. Although I'm glad to say that none of these medical facts have been a revelation to me, there have been some stories that have been uncomfortable for yours truly to read out loud. My dad is a doctor and his friend was an OB-GYN and was telling my dad a time when a couple came into his office and they were having difficulty having a child. They were trying for over a year to have a child, but the wife never got pregnant. Found out that the man and the woman came up in a very strict upbringing and the man was never putting his eggplant inside of her. He was basically rubbing his eggplant on top of her hoo-ha and would splooge across her belly. Then he would take his finger and smear his semen all over the top of her hoo-ha. My dad's friend had to explain how to do the deed to both of them and tell them what to do and how to do it. It was an awkward conversation. I just kept thinking, did they not ever watch adult flicks or have that talk with their parents? Have they never even seen stuff related to doing the deed ever? It was just a crazy story, and I wonder if they ever figured it out and actually eventually had kids or not. My friend told me that her OB-GYN friend told her that apparently a significant number of people try to get pregnant by doing it in the butt. Proper education on these things matters, people. Years ago, I knew a woman that wanted to get pregnant, but that wasn't happening. She told me that one problem was her husband insisting on turning her around at the end and finishing in her butt. Now, she knew that wasn't good for conception, but he didn't, and she couldn't explain it to him in a way that worked. Perhaps I'm just being naive, but things like this make me wonder if he really knew or was playing dumb with his wife so he didn't have to have kids. My doctor told me a story about a baby he delivered. It was the couple's 6th, and they were very observant Orthodox Jews, so when she called at 11 p.m. on Shabbat that labor had started, the husband couldn't drive them to the hospital himself. Although the doctor understood, he tried to help them understand how emergent the situation was because the delivery was going to be so fast. The doctor races to the hospital and waits. He waits 30 minutes. An hour. He's pacing the drop-off. Finally, 90 minutes later, a taxi screeches into the parking lot at 2 a.m. The doctor opens her door to see a baby crowning and the woman yelling and the driver yelling. The husband throws open his door and just sprints off into the parking lot yelling. Does a full loop while the baby is born and runs up as the nurses are wrapping the baby and getting mum and baby into a wheelchair. The doctor said, "What happened? Where did you go?" The dad, I just didn't know what to do." The poor guy was so hopped up on adrenaline that he just took off. Not a mind-blowing thing that was said, but still kind of funny. When I was in medical school, I did my OB rotation on high-risk areas. Medical students were generally scared of these areas, so I was the only student with an awesome attending physician and got to do a lot. We called the attending on this service a random thought generator. If he thought something, he would say or act on it. We had one student that showed up on our service in active labor. She had had a very uneventful pregnancy and couldn't figure out why she was on our service, but hey, we'll take a normal patient. She arrived with perfect makeup, perfect hair, and she had the perfect epidural and was in no pain or distress. The attending looked at me and said that I'd be doing this delivery. Okay, I thought, no problem. Then he looked at the father and said, no, you'll deliver this one. The father got wide-eyed and the mother started laughing. He's an air traffic controller. I've never seen him panic before. The nurse took him to the sink, gave him a scrub brush, and had him start washing his hands. We turned back to the mum. Okay, push. 1, 2, 3, 10, relax. We looked at the dad and he's still washing that same finger he started with. Okay, that's good enough. A delivery is by no means sterile. Put this and this and this on. Our attending didn't put women in stirrups, but would instead deliver straight onto the bed. He sat the dad on the bed with him on one side and me on the other, and the dad delivered his own healthy child. My mum taught labor and delivery. If the baby won't fit, it's too late for a C-section, so you break up the baby's shoulder so it can fit through. One of her students asked why they don't break the mum's hip instead. Not a doctor, but pregnant. I told my boyfriend we should make and freeze 1 to 2 months of meals before the birth, because we'd be too tired to cook. He looked at me knowingly and said, ah yes, like pureed fruits and vegetables, so we don't have to mash them ourselves. He literally thought you feed the baby food from day one. We're in our 30s, college-educated, he has a huge, close extended family with lots of babies, and he knows I'm going to breastfeed. I guess he thought you do them both from day one? My ex-boyfriend is an OB-GYN. He got annoyed with me when I was having cramps and said because he was an OB-GYN, he knew exactly what pain felt like and told me to get over it. Should have seen that as the first of many red flags. Obligatory, not an OB-GYN, but an operating room nurse. One gynecologist told us once about their gynecologist in training. We all knew him. He was a young, friendly, and good guy to work with. He was already married, father of 2 kids at the age of 25. This guy only had one negative aspect, and it was affecting his work dearly. He was extremely religious. This doesn't have to be negative, but his decision-making was based on his religion, and he often refused to offer contraceptives to his female patients, and he was reserved talking and explaining contraception methods to couples. It was against his religion. Eventually word got around with his superiors and they had to sit him down, explaining with him it's against the law to withhold any form of help and information. I was a receptionist and this woman came in crying. Her husband was behind her and she said, "Help, I'm bleeding." Long story short, we found out she was actively miscarrying in the lobby. She went to the back room for emergent care while a surgical room was prepped and she was, of course, crying and moaning and seemed to be in immense pain. The husband was stoic the whole time, nonplussed, not bothered in the least. He frowned at her moaning and said, "Will you knock it off? You're embarrassing me." He even had the nerve to ask us to watch his daughter in our break room while he went for a smoke. Had to have an emergency C-section and my husband was in there watching the whole thing over the sheet. After the baby was born, the doctor removed the placenta and my husband asked, "What is that?" Without missing a beat, the doctor turns to the second doctor assisting, holds it up and says, "I don't know. What is this?" All I could see at this point was my husband's face, and it was so worth it.
Reddit, what's the funniest thing that a random stranger said to you that made you die laughing inside? I was in the drive-thru of a Wendy's one time. An employee exited the building with his headphones on and was singing "Who Let the Dogs Out" at the top of his lungs. He saw me, stopped singing, and started walking away. A few seconds later, he comes up to my window and said, "Yeah, that is what I'm listening to." Then he walked away. I laughed so hard at the whole situation. I assume he was just doing a bit for his friends inside and you just had the pleasure of witnessing it. Okay, the laughter was not entirely inside, but years ago on the subway in New York, a crazy dude walks on the train and starts screaming at everyone, "You're all going to hell!" and then steps off as the doors close. Total silence as the weirdness of the moment settles in. Then, without missing a beat, guy across from me goes, "Crap, I thought this train was going to Harlem." Entire subway car of cynical New Yorkers bursts out laughing. I gotta admit, that's probably the best response that guy could have come up with. I was helping a customer pick out a new bra, and she said she wanted her breasts to be lifted. She said, "My boobs are so saggy that if my nipples were eyeballs, I'd be able to see if my shoes were untied." I really tried my best to remain professional, but I couldn't stop laughing. She said it to get a laugh out of you. You're allowed to laugh. Was leaving Walmart and the 80-ish-year-old greeter says, "Thanks for shopping at Dollar Tree." Okay, one of two things happening here. Either one, their greeters may be starting to lose it just a little bit, or two, they just like doing it for fun. What are you gonna do? Fire the 80-year-old greeter for making a joke? A movie had just ended. Me and my dad joined the mad rush to the bathrooms. Urinals are packed. It's our turn and we're doing our business, and suddenly someone rips a huge fart. It's pretty funny, but we all have manners and we're still peeing. Suddenly this dude proclaims, "It was me!" and runs out the door. The whole bathroom erupts in laughter. I must have been about 10 or 11. I sat down on a bench next to an old guy to sort out my shoe. I took my shoe off and he just turns to me and says, "Are they golfing socks?" I look at him with a completely blank look on my face, thinking, WTF? As I looked away, he just said, "There's a hole in one." This dude saw an opportunity for a dad joke with a random kid and just went for it. I can't say I blame him. The time I was waiting for takeout and the amputee owner struck up a conversation. "My friend, you have to be really careful if you ever get shot in the knee or any leg bone. They don't warn you that you can't have sex for months. One night you're taking home a beautiful girl to show her your scars, and the next morning your leg's gone." I feel like he might not be telling that story correctly. A few years ago, I let a friend cut my hair. It did not go well. I was living in Philadelphia at the time and was walking through South Philly when I passed two strangers in the middle of a conversation. As I pass, one of them says to the other, "Hold up, I gotta talk to this guy." He proceeds to shout at me, "Hey yo, your hair looks horrible, come over here." I was amused, partly because of his bluntness and partially because he wasn't wrong. I was curious, so I walked over to him and he says, "Look, a buddy of mine owns a barber shop 2 blocks away. Here's his business card. I'll write my name on there. If you mention that I sent you, he'll give you a good deal. Bruh, but seriously, take care of that." I never ended up going to his friend's shop, but I frequently use this story as the perfect example of Philly culture. Rude, blunt, and in your face, yet somehow coming from a place of genuine care. Plus, it's just hilarious. A few months ago, I was waiting at a road crossing with loads of other strangers, waiting for the man to turn green. This was a busy main road in my city. The little girl on the other side of the road did the most accurate impression of the beep beep that the crossing makes so blind people know it's safe to cross. And the entire crowd of people just stepped into the road. I had seen her do it, so I stayed put, but I couldn't stop laughing. My girlfriend was very confused. 50 adults pranked by one absolute genius 6-ish-year-old. It was magical. By the way, it was really busy, so traffic was hardly moving. There was no chance of being injured. It could have been a lot worse, but yeah, people need to actually pay attention and not just go off a random audio cue that a 6-year-old gave you. May of 2000, passing through Norwood, Louisiana with a friend. At around 2 in the afternoon, we stopped to gas up and grab some snacks at the most podunk gas station known to man. A young man, extremely agitated, comes in with frustrated gestures and angrily shouts and gestures at the cashier with an accent that is beyond region, beyond stereotyping, beyond anything I have ever heard before. "Where you got John Wally Mellion at?" At the top of his lungs, approaching hysteria and tears. I feel like I should probably translate this one for you, as I had to read it as it was said. He was asking, "Where are the god-darned watermelons at?" Just to be clear. When I was about 8 years old, 40 some odd years ago, my mother and I were waiting to be seated at a restaurant, and an older gentleman was ahead of us also waiting. The waitress asked him if he'd be smoking, back when that was still a thing in restaurants, and he replied, "No, but I may burst into flames later." Young me laughed all through lunch at that. In fact, it still makes me giggle. The college I attend frequently has local elementary and middle school kids on tours, especially on Fridays. One particular Friday, I was in line for the cafeteria when a group of kids came walking by with a tour guide. One kinda chubby little dude looked a bit uncomfortable. He was biting his lip a little and sweating. This part of the tour is usually where they have a bathroom break, and clearly Buddy needed to go. At this point, I should note that the bathrooms are visible from where we were standing, but the tour guide, a fellow student of mine, didn't seem to notice. She just kept going on, talking about the history of the building. I watched this kid go from nervous to deeply anxious to visibly clenching over the span of about 3 minutes. He's staring at the stick figure dude on the men's bathroom sign as if it was the risen Christ. Miss Tour Guide takes a break in her spiel. I figure she's done. The next words out of her mouth will be the ones to free this boy from the purgatory that is having to use the bathroom on a school trip. It'll be over. He'll be free. What followed instead was this. So, in 1995, a professor named ABC Kalamazoo, "Move, lady, I'm gonna poop my pants!" He ran past her to the bathroom and presumably destroyed it. Poor guy. Had the entire line in tears with laughter though. Hey, when you gotta go, you gotta go. Tour guide needs to pick up on these things. When I was a freshman in college, I had a pair of rainbow bell-bottoms that I had made myself and wore quite a bit. I was walking through the city back to the dorms when a guy rode up behind me on a bicycle. He was old, had long scraggly gray hair, and a bright red and yellow windsuit on. He rode beside me for a second, stared, and then yelled, "Miss, your pants are hot! What?" And then rode away into the sunset. It was so random and hilarious. Every time I wore those pants, my friends would run up behind me and yell, "Your pants are what?" Something I overheard as 2 kids walked past our caravan park site. There's a rumbling boom of distant thunder. I like thunder. It sounds like a 200-year-old dog who's retired and helps old people who are blind get around. Kid number 2 doesn't respond. You know? But why is it retired? Because it's old, but it's still helping blind people. Apparently the first kid had no answer for that. Just the other day, checking out at the Cracker Barrel, the older gentleman ringing up my wife accidentally said, with all confidence, "Have a thank you." Sounds like the poor guy just mixed up his catchphrases. Not so much said to me as overheard. Walking down the street with my fiance after dinner, a man and a woman passed by us. Very clearly, I heard the man say, "And that's the second time I got crabs. I just keep a special little comb at the house now, just in case." I'm not sure of any particulars and have thought about that interaction often. So many questions. I know they heard me laugh though. I hope this wasn't like a first date he was on or something. I used to be a smoker. One time, a scruffy-looking man asked me for a light. I told him I only had matches. It was very windy. He said, "That's okay, there's a trick to it. You light the match and then suck down real hard. You get a mouthful of sulfur that way, but you gotta have a trick when you're going 30 miles an hour on top of the tank." I once was canoeing with my fiance for the first time, and we were having a bit of trouble at first getting a rhythm going. So we were along the edge of the water hitting the canal. This random couple was walking along the wall, and the guy said to his wife while pointing at us, "Canoeing, the truest test of love." My fiance and I burst into laughter for 20 minutes, and then finally got our rhythm together. That guy sounds like he's been where you are. "You and your sister look exactly alike." My sister was adopted from Asia. I'm so white I freckle instead of tan. I just about died of laughter because the woman actually meant it. For context, she'd met my sister a couple weeks before, but I hadn't been there, and she'd mistaken me for my sister. I'm as white as a fluorescent light bulb and my foster daughter is black. Of course, I introduce her as my daughter when we're out. Some people would be like, "She's your daughter?" I would pull her closer and point back and forth to our faces and say, "We're practically twins, can't you tell?" That usually got people to laugh. I was at a 50th wedding anniversary party and there were lots of elderly people in attendance. An old man was standing next to me and said, "It looks like a graveyard in here." I literally spit my beer out. We were outdoors. The kicker was the guy was close to the same age as everyone else. I'm in the bathroom at work washing my hands, and one of the professors that I don't think I've ever actually spoken to comes in and starts washing her lanyard in the sink. I try to make small talk with work people even though I suck at it. So I try to strike up a conversation that goes down as follows. Morning. I spilled coffee on my lanyard and now it's all sticky. Wow, that's the worst. At this point, she turns off the faucet and looks at me completely deadpan, with eyes that said she wanted to feed me my own innards, and said, I think genocide is worse. So I awkwardly mumbled, yeah, okay, bye, have a nice day, and quickly escaped. It's turned into a running joke in my office now, though. Anything from the printer being out of toner to a fire drill on a cold day is literally worse than genocide. Why did she have to take it to such an extreme? You're just trying to make casual conversation. I watched a guy walking to class at my college years ago saying, "Get the hell out of my way," to a pigeon standing in his path. The pigeon quickly waddled off to the side. I was doing tech support over the phone for an internet company at a call center. I got a call from an elderly woman whose internet had stopped working. After checking that the modem was working and that there were no issues in her area, I was scheduling a visit from one of our technicians, when she suddenly says, "Oh, I know what happened. The cat was playing around the router yesterday." Right. You think it took a cable or something? No, he probably took away the Wi-Fi. You mean like he moved the router? No, he probably took the airwaves of the Wi-Fi. You know how cats see things we can't. He surely saw the Wi-Fi signal, grabbed it, and took it away. It took all my willpower to finish the call and not laugh in her face. Yeah, sometimes it's easier to just let things go than to try and explain. I was crossing the street once and my sunglasses fell off my shirt directly to the floor. I just realized it had happened after I got to the other side of the street and my mom pointed it out. The closest car was pretty far away, but I was still very anxious about it. I ran back into the middle of the street and tried to grab it, but was so nervous it fell out of my hands 2 times before I finally got it and ran to the other side of the street again. The car finally reaches us and the driver stops, rolls down the windows and says, "That's what I call survival instinct," and drives away. I laughed so hard. Years ago, when queuing up for movie tickets with my family, the attendant asked the ages of our 4 kids to see if they could all get children's price tickets. I announced their ages 7, 9, 11, and 13. Without missing a beat, the stranger behind us declared, "That's an odd group." Don't worry, they'll even out next year. My friend and I, both female, used to go to the Saturday market to buy fruit and veg. My friend is quite shy towards other people. I had just bought 2 huge watermelons and was carrying them, 1 arm each. As a guy walked past us, he shouted, "You've got nice big melons." Didn't say anything else, just kept walking. My friend was shocked, and I almost peed myself laughing so much. First day in basic training. All hell had broken loose. It was just screaming and confusion. I had an instructor come up to me with another kid in tow and yell, "Trainee, do you know where the latrine is? I want to escort this trainee to the latrine so he can go sick himself in the proper facilities." I didn't know where they were, but figured I'd give it my best shot. So myself and this kid walk outside. I look over at him and he's greenish, kind of whimper crying and hunched over. We take 2 steps outside when he pops. Projectile vomit all over the ground. A huge mess. I look up and see an even bigger, scarier instructor rounding the corner about 15 feet in front of us. He walks up, looks the kid in the eye, and with an icy hatred says, "What did you just do to my ground? Do you really hate my ground so much you'd sick yourself on it? I want you to apologize to my ground and then clean yourself up." I nearly lost it. The kid whimpered out a, "Sorry I puked on you" ground, and we were on our way. In college, this one girl in the front of the room chimes in on something and mentioned that her eyes change color depending on the summer every year, from blue to green. This black dude in the back of the class whispers to his friend, "Yeah, and I turn white in the winter." I had to remove myself immediately before I made a scene from laughing so hard. I was rollerblading down a hill too fast and landed on my butt. Painful, sure, but not excruciatingly so. An old man walked by and said in the most jolly voice, "Is your behind okay, young lady?" I was shaking of laughter. My behind was okay, yes. I'm a hostess at a restaurant, and my coworker was holding the door open for this table of 4 very old black women. And this woman, who had just celebrated her 102nd birthday, says to her friend, "Can you imagine that? Never thought I'd see the day a white boy holds the door open for us. Oh, if I was younger, I'd have to make my way to you, young man." When I was around 10, my dad took my brother and me to a Sox game at Fenway. We got to the park and I was putting mustard on a hot dog from one of those mustard box push-down nozzle things. This random guy next to me goes, "Yeah, buddy, lather it up." 10-year-old me thought it was about the funniest thing I'd ever heard, and I still chuckle when I think about it as an adult. I'm at a festival and sitting around a campfire when a very intoxicated man kept saying, "I need to borrow your fireplace." He wouldn't let it go, despite being right by the fire. Turns out he needed a lighter for his cigarette and was so drunk that he forgot what it was called. My laughter was not internal. I died laughing right in front of him. I was riding the public bus in Vegas about 13 years ago. I'm sitting kind of in the middle. There's this guy sitting kind of towards the front, having an extremely animated conversation with another guy next to him. The other guy looks like he's barely acknowledging what animated guy is saying. We get to a stop and animated talker guy gets up, but other guy doesn't. It was then that I realized that they weren't together, and that this dude was just talking in a semi-crazy way to some rando dude on the bus. But animated talker doesn't want to get off. He wants the other guy to acknowledge that he was right about something. The other guy is just nodding and trying to get on with his life. But this lunatic just kept yammering away. There gets to be some audible grumbling from the other riders because this dude is now holding up the bus. He finally goes to get off. The dude almost makes it to the sidewalk when he does an about face, gets back on the bus, and yells out, "And another thing!" At that second, nearly everyone on the bus yelled the guy to get off. He obviously wasn't expecting it, as he kind of recoiled and skittered away. The guy does this awkward half-run thing directly into a psychiatrist's office. It was at this moment that an older gruff guy who was sitting in the back and quietly reading a newspaper this entire time pipes up and says, "Going to see the psychiatrist, go figure." Everyone on the bus, including myself, just busted out laughing. Not to me, but I was nearby. I was in a supermarket in the fruit and veg section. 2 women were arguing behind me. One says, "We should get this." The other responds, "No, we're getting this one. It's better, I should know." The first, sounding upset, says, "Yeah, but..." The other interrupts and says, "You know I was a chef. I worked at KFC." I had to go 2 aisles over so they didn't hear me howling with laughter. I don't think it counts as a chef if you work at KFC. You're not really making food. You're just kind of heating it up. I was walking to class the other day and walked by 2 girls FaceTiming their friend, and I hear this. "Oh my god, we saw y'all broke up. What happened?" "He drank directly out of my Brita water filter." If I heard that just walking past me, there's no way I'd be able to contain myself. Little girl to me after I explain my service dog helps me when I'm sick. "Oh, so he's your dog Tor." Me trying to keep a straight face. Yes, exactly. Kids got the puns, I gotta say. I never would have thought of that. When I served, I had a table of about 20 Asian people. The head of the group shook my hand and introduced himself as Tony the Tiger. He tried to sound cool and tough, but all I could think of was the cereal mascot. How are you going to name yourself after a cereal mascot and try and take yourself seriously? Come on, buddy. Not me, but one of my customers. He's doing a finishing job for a billionaire in the city, when the designer insists that they use booties or shoe covers. He said he just had his men take their shoes off at the door. Billionaire woman responds, "Peter, their socks on my carpet is like your penis in my vagina. Disgusting." Funniest thing I've heard in a while. That's gotta be one of the harshest burns I've heard in a while. I have a 5.5-pound Chihuahua. He's about as intimidating as a bunny rabbit. I was walking him on the grass along the road. A couple of walkers were coming near me, and my dog started barking at them, so I picked him up. The guy says, "Thank you for picking him up. We were so scared." On the L in Chicago, a group of older guys with shoeshine kits gets off at a stop. One of them drops a small bag of white powder that I presume to be illegal. Another younger guy bends down, picks it up, and tells the guy, "You dropped this." Older guy grabs the baggie and the doors close. Young guy looks at me and says, "I don't know why I did that." I still laugh about it. The young guy was just trying to be polite, and it overrode any other warning signals. I actually did something very similar when I found a couple in the staircase here in my building heating something up in a spoon with a lighter. As soon as I opened the door, they immediately just tried to take off, but they left another lighter sitting on the stairs. I called out to them to come back and handed them their lighter. I knew exactly what they were doing. I don't know why I still felt the need to be polite.
Lawyers of Reddit. What's the dumbest thing you've seen take place in front of the judge? Serious replies only, but some of these are pretty funny. Saw one defense attorney demonstrate twerking during closing arguments of an assault with intent to kill trial. Your Honor, my client is not guilty. Why? Let me ask you this. Have you seen this? Throwing it back for a real one? I rest my case. DUI/DWAI/drug defendants show up to criminal court with beer/weed/F the police t-shirts constantly. During the direct examination of the defendant, the PD kept asking leading questions. After 5 or so sustained objections in a row, the judge had enough and sent the jury out of the room to yell at the PD. During the cross, about 10 minutes later, the judge again sent the jury out to yell at the defendant for trying to tell his story instead of just answering yes or no questions, not to mention he was clearly lying through his teeth. Also, the defendant was recorded committing the crime. So yeah, he was later found guilty. I was in front of a judge for oral argument and the other side, pro per, failed to show up. The judge called him and made him argue against our motion while driving and on his cell phone. The judge spoke for a minute, setting up the arguments for the guy, basically leading him to the core argument and what he should be saying if he wanted to get our motion denied. After a few moments of silence, the guy responds, "Judge, I'm too stupid to understand what you just said." That ended the argument quickly and in our favor. Personal story, I was sued once. Well, they meant to sue me, but actually sued my uncle. Same career. Named him in the documents and served him. Me, being young and clueless, thought I should go to the trial just in case. My uncle told me I absolutely should not. Now, here's where the opposing attorney screwed up. They never once tried to interview or talk to me, or my uncle, or they would have realized their mistake. Day of the trial, my uncle actually made it to the stand. From the way I heard it, questioning was hilarious. Were you working on blah 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 day? No. Please read this payroll statement. Doesn't this payroll statement say you were working? No. Look at this highlighted line. Isn't your name RVW260? Yes. Then you were working. No. This says KVW260 was working. My uncle said even the judge was laughing as he immediately tossed the case. People finding religion in front of a judge at sentencing. The judge would always respond with, "God may have forgiven you, but the state has not." That judge was a boss. Firm, fair, and totally awesome. That's the hardest thing I've ever heard a judge say. One guy I saw said, "Your Honor, I haven't been drinking anymore. I have been clean for 6 months, God is my witness." The judge responded, "Well, a lot of people say that, but the funny thing is, not once have they ever been able to bring him in to testify." The dumbest thing I've seen is a guy show up for not doing his community service in a shirt that said, "I'm not lazy, I just don't like to work." Judge asked him about it, and he said it was his only clean shirt. Everybody had a good laugh, even the judge. Seconds after being served with a protection from abuse order, opposing party flipped off the person who had obtained the order, and seconds after that approached her and asked if they could at least talk about it. Promptly arrested. I'm doing jury selection on a civil case in California. It is going to be a long trial, 6 weeks, so the judge is giving jurors a lot of latitude if they claim any hardship for serving that long. After about 30 minutes of voir dire, which ended up taking 3 days and several panels, one guy stands up and says in very broken English that he can't follow. The judge asks him if he speaks English well enough to render a fair verdict, and he looks confused and says no. The judge thanks him for his service and dismisses him from the panel. In perfect English, accent now gone, he says, "Thank you very much, Your Honor. Where should I put my badge before I leave?" Judge found him in contempt and ordered him to stay for jury duty for the next week. Usually you just stay for 1 day. If you don't get picked for a jury in that day, your service is over. During a plea hearing on a prostitution charge, the state proceeds to give the narrative of events. The SA starts to get a little uncomfortable trying to describe the specific act that led to the arrest. We all know the line he's reading is, quote, sucked him off, but he's trying to find a nice way to say it for the record. He finally goes, where she then, proceeded to perform, fellatio. As soon as he says fellatio, the defendant stands up and straight up yells, I didn't do any of that French crap, I gave him a blowjob! Client said to judge, well, that's your opinion. It went as badly as you'd expect. Thank you, judge. No matter what happens. My objection gets overruled? Thank you, judge. Lose my motion? Thank you, judge. Judge says I'm fat, ugly, and unlovable? Thank you, judge. Unfair dismissal case. My client was summarily terminated for no reason. She recorded the dismissal on a dictaphone. The torrent of misogynistic, hateful abuse her boss spewed at her was unbelievable. He also assaulted her as she was removing the hands-free phone device from her car, repeatedly slammed her leg in the door, causing a fracture, all the while screaming at the top of his lungs, "Screw you, you piece of crap." Suffice to say, we played that tape 1,000,000 times in cross-examination. It was more what didn't take place. I was working for the DA's office, and we had a guy scheduled to appear for a vandalism charge. The guy had a long history of minor offenses, but the judge was in a lenient mood that day, so the guy was probably going to get off light. At the scheduled time, he hasn't showed up. His lawyer tells the judge he hasn't heard from the defendant that day. We wait. 10, 20, 30 minutes. At the half-hour mark, the judge is furious. She angrily tells the lawyer to get out and find his client and get him before her, no matter what it took, or she'd rain heck down upon the defendant. An hour later, the lawyer slinks back into the courtroom. The judge sees him and interrupts another lawyer to call him up to the podium. The poor lawyer proceeds to tell us that the defendant didn't show up because he was actually sitting in jail 2 counties over, having been caught trespassing the night before. Needless to say, that defendant got the book thrown at him. At the end of a DWI trial involving a pretty major wreck, in which the defendant was found guilty, the judge asked the defendant if he had anything he wished to tell the court during the sentencing phase. The guy thought for a second and said, Your Honor, I'm real sorry. Normally I drive a lot more careful when I'm drunk. Had a client toss his car keys on the defendant table moments before sentencing for his 4th OWI. Judge asked how he got to court. Without blinking, said, I drove. Why? Good way to get a quick bail jumping charge for violating his no driving bail condition. We all forget to turn off our phones in court, but I once faced off against a lawyer whose phone rang right while he was in the middle of making his final submission to the judge. Even that might have been forgivable if he hadn't interrupted his submissions to take the call. I swear I was arguing against a preliminary hearing against a defense attorney from out of town, and in the middle of one of his direct examinations, his phone rings and he freaking answers it. Hello? Oh, hi. Listen, I can't talk. I'm in court. What? No, I'm in court. I'll call you back. Sorry, Judge. The look on the judge's face was priceless. Then it was time for him to make the closing argument. He looks at the judge and goes, One more time, Judge. What were the charges? DUI, dude. Just DUI. How did you get through this whole thing and not realize there was only one charge and it was DUI? This sounds straight out of a lawyer's sitcom, and I would watch the heck out of that. A lot of clients want to speak up, but Judge, you don't understand. But giving them the look of death and a jab in the ribs usually shuts them up pretty quickly. They're usually pretty okay. I found this gem doing some research one day, quoted from the case. As is evident from the foregoing excerpt from the transcript, the judge would not permit the appellant to speak to the issue of judicial bias. The appellant was agitated. The judge was, no doubt, frustrated. This exchange culminated in the appellant choosing to disrupt the proceedings by commencing to disrobe. The appellant described her actions to the judge as, quote, a form of nonviolent protest, which would continue until the judge would hear her motion for judicial bias. Wish I was there for that one. You don't often hear about a lot of court cases where people take their clothes off, but the formal language used in this makes it 100 times funnier. I do family law. Told 11 clients in a row that they could be drug tested, 5-panel P-test, you need to be cleaned for about a week. As part of the custody evaluation process, 7 of them failed. Lawyer here, I had a case where I was suing a lesbian on behalf of her former lesbian partner. It was a relationship property case. The one who was being sued put an issue whether they had even been lovers, or whether my client was just a flatmate or boarder in her home for the several years they lived together. I had no idea how I was going to prove that, but it turned out my client had saved all of the soppy love notes that her partner had left on the fridge, most of which were, "I love you, you little squishy oyster," and other ribald descriptions. That issue sunk pretty quickly once the box of those were produced. Sorry, that just sounds so wholesome. I would love to be called someone's squishy little oyster. That makes no sense to anyone except me, and that's why that's so special. I've seen a woman pee herself. Situation wasn't so tragic to warrant it, but she was sent back to jail, so understandable. A man called the judge by only his last name, which is great if you think he'll reciprocate the upcoming fist bump, and a large number of high, drunk, and other people say, "This is bullcrap." Also not a great technique in court like the first two. I've got a pretty good one, so hope this isn't buried. Husband and wife are going through a divorce and are having a custody hearing. Basically, the attorney is representing the father who wants to be able to have some rights to see his son, but mother has already been awarded full rights. Father's attorney is super passive-aggressive against the mother's attorney, really rubbing everybody the wrong way. Eventually, the mother's attorney snaps and quips back, "If he was as good of a father and husband as you claim, we wouldn't be here, would we?" Father's attorney has some dumb reply and the judge starts losing his cool. Another few comments later, and the judge ends the hearing. No adjudication, just takes the filings and demands that the parties get out of his chambers. This wasn't in the courtroom itself. In the hallway, the mother's attorney loses his crap, starts yelling at the other attorney. He yells back. They get into a full-on yelling match in the courthouse. Then the father, who is 230 pounds plus, steps between them to entreat them to chill out, starts telling both his lawyer and the wife's attorney that they are acting like children. People in the courthouse are giving them looks, assistants peeking out of doors, and the wife steps in. "You're both acting like a couple of kids. Soon-to-be ex-husband and I can handle this on our own." Then the couple who was in the middle of a vicious divorce step aside, talk for a few minutes, and walk back. "He's going to take son Tuesday night. You two," he points to the attorneys, "do whatever you need to do with the judge." I don't know what happened with that case, but it warmed my heart to see a father step between the two trained legal professionals and impress his wife so much that they were able to work things out. The sad part? The husband's lawyer saw it as a win for him because his conduct put his client in a position to, quote, break up the fight and show her that he is a great guy. Update, for those asking, this was in 2009. I don't know the final disposition of the case, just that the mother agreed to let the father spend some time with their son. And yes, this is a true story. I will never forget. We had a defendant bust into the court from the local jail. His case was called and he promptly walked up the podium, looked the judge dead in the eye, and crapped his pants. Jumpsuit. He knew he was going back to prison and just wanted to cause as much havoc as possible. People were gagging and there was a general sense of, did that just happen? In the air. I'm going to start off with some context. This event took place on the first day of a murder trial in the Hong Kong High Court. Now, the official language used in the High Courts of Hong Kong is English and not Cantonese. The judge for this particular case was British, but the lead prosecuting attorney was from Hong Kong. Whenever he spoke, the judge had a hard time understanding him. To make things worse, the trial and evidence packet composed by the prosecution was a complete mess and did not include an English version. During the opening statement, the lead prosecution attorney decided that he needed to grab his colleague and act out the murder in order to get the message across. This was not pre-planned, and to make a long story short, the judge adjourned about an hour in to postpone the trial in order for the prosecution to, quote, sort out this mess. That was the dumbest thing I've ever seen in a trial, and I can't imagine how desperate the prosecution was to do such a thing. A case where a large gangster-type defendant was accused of slashing the throat of a small, skinny guy. The defense counsel made him wear a large coat to conceal his size, and brought in an interpreter to slowly translate each word of the proceedings because, quote, he had absolutely no understanding of English. 10 minutes into the trial, a cell phone goes off and rings for about a minute. The judge is furious, and the ringing is amplified in the large courtroom. The hearing stops and everyone is looking around trying to figure out where the sound is coming from. Suddenly, the defendant stands up and pulls the phone out of his pocket. It is still ringing, but only louder. The defendant then yells, "Hey judge, I don't know how to turn my phone off." On a hearing regarding a restraining order requested against him, a man raised the defense of, quote, she be trippin'. Restraining order granted. God bless General Sessions Court. When I was in law school, my school had a mock trial program that took place at the local county court, where the judges were actual judges, prosecutors, and attorneys from the local area. So one day, a mock trial is happening, and one student, who was a law student but not in the mock trial program, is acting as a witness being questioned on the stand. The person was getting a little too rude acting in character, so the judge, who was an actual judge, admonished him to tone it down. The student didn't listen, so the judge took them to a little side chat and told him he really needs to stop. The student blows up at the judge and tells him that he doesn't have to listen to a petty state court judge and proceeded to verbally assault him. Judge filed an assault charge. Student was kicked out of school for damaging the school's relationship with the local courts, and I would imagine likely never got admitted to another law school, or, if they did, would have a hard time passing the character and fitness test to practice law in that state. This is a much longer story, but I'm on mobile. Anyways, a guy came into court on a pervert charge. His friend is a lawyer who comes into court with a black suit, snakeskin boots, and a bolo tie. It is glorious how slimy he looks. When he gets up to talk to the judge, he says, "I've known John for 20 years and he is a good man. He is not a pervert, sir. I should know, because I am one. I miss working for the DA. Sometimes the criminals write themselves." So at the arrest stage, when cautioned, in the UK, any response you give / anything you say under caution is recorded and given as evidence. One of these guys is arrested for a scrap and kicks off in custody, calling us effing this, C-word that. One custody officer goes, "Sir, calm down. You realize everything you say will be recorded and told to the magistrate?" He replied, "Oh, F the magistrate and the frickin' court. The magistrate is a jerk." Court day comes. I'm called to provide evidence to show that the man was badly mannered and aggressive in nature. Amongst other statements and actions he made, I say, "Your worship, whilst in custody, the defendant did not calm, and custody officers' attempts to calm him by warning him that we would provide what he says as evidence to yourself was met with, 'Oh, F the magistrate and their freaking court. The magistrate is a jerk.' Well, that was the end of my evidence, and the court retired for a lunch break. The magistrates went to town on him in sentencing. I only have one. Was in court during a sentencing, and the defendant, not my client, approaches the bench with his attorney. The judge begins to go through the sentencing colloquy, and the man says, "F you, judge." The judge, a female, was pretty shocked and just said, "Excuse me?" I said, "F you, judge. Ain't no woman told me what to do in my life. Sentence me to whatever." She just sat there dumbfounded for a second. Then, "All right, fine, Mr. Blank. I hereby sentence you to life in the penitentiary." Well, that just sounds freaking fantastic. Defendant was already doing a life without parole sentence and had this charge pending when he received his first sentence. He knew he was basically untouchable, and no matter what the judge did, his sentence could never get worse. 2 good stories from arguing motions. 1. I was arguing a case should be dismissed because of a decade-long delay. Sketchy opposing counsel says to me, "Where's your authority to show that delay is long enough?" Judge says, "Right here, case dismissed," and points to his file. Number 2, opposing counsel asked if I was crapping him when I said, despite a typo, the motion could still be granted. I crap you not, he cursed during oral argument. When I was a public defender, I represented a woman in felony DUI trial. It was a felony only because her license was already suspended when she got the DUI. Her BAC was .30, yes, not .03, and there were empty vodka bottles rolling around in her car. I found case law that said the state must prove she actually received notice that her license was suspended in order to charge it as a felony. On my motion after the state's case, again after the defense's case, and again after the jury verdict, the judge grudgingly had to dismiss the felony part because the state couldn't prove the woman ever received notice that her license was suspended. The judge made a very clear record, however, that the conviction for DUI was solid and unaffected by dismissing the felony. Whatever, we beat the felony, which was the difference between 4 months in prison and 24 hours in county jail. That's not the dumb part. This woman was knucking futs and swore she wasn't drunk. Bull crap, she was drunk every time I ever talked to her, and no one would dismiss her case. She filed a lawsuit against the public defender's office, my supervisor personally, me personally, the county superior court, and the judge personally. She would show up at the courthouse every day to, quote, read her file and harass the court staff. The judge eventually barred her from coming to his court without written permission. She started wearing wigs and big hats and sunglasses to skulk around his court unrecognized. No idea what happened to her after that. I swear to drunk I'm not God. We had an expert witness testifying about gunshot residue. He was asked about how long such residue would remain on a given surface. His response, before the court, well, I like to say it's like the difference between love and herpes. Herpes lasts forever. A guy was getting sentenced for stealing, and the judge asked him if he had anything to say before the sentence was passed. These are the words he chose to utter. Your Honor, if I'd known they was watching me, I never would have done it. A guy getting sued for millions for a scam car dealership purchase before retiring to the desert with the scam proceeds showed up on the first day of trial wearing a $50,000 gold watch. His lawyer saw the jury noticing the conspicuous display of wealth and got the guy to ditch the watch, which left him showing a bright white line highlighting his desert tan. The jury was then eyeing him as someone trying to hide his wealth, so to hide the tan line, he showed up on day 2 wearing a $30 Timex. I saw one of the jurors point out his own Timex to his neighbor and shake his head in disgust. Unfortunately, the jury never got to decide that case. They'd have creamed him. Once, I represented a defendant in a defamation case. The plaintiff was crazy and self-represented. He also had a bit of a language barrier and claimed to be a doctor of law in his country of origin. His sentences sounded reasonable, but in an extended conversation, it was clear he was misunderstanding longer words. He was so bad during questioning that I got about 3 different opportunities to cross-examine himself just because his story kept changing. The judge also indicated that I should leave evidence objections to him because there were so many problems with everything he did. At the trial, this man was amazing. I wish my client or I had the money to buy the transcript just for sentimental reasons. One of my favorite exchanges was where he cross-examined my client's witness, who said she had seen the plaintiff yelling at the defendant. What was I saying to her? I don't remember. But you still say I was yelling? Yes, I remembered what you were yelling, but not what words you used. So I was just screaming like this, makes screaming noises at the witness, holds his hands up in the air like, got her, and smiled triumphantly at the judge. Another exchange, same trial to my client. So you say you were scared? Yes, you were very aggressive. But why were you scared? You were yelling at me and you're much taller than me. How many people have I killed? What? How many people have I killed that you know of? I don't know. So why would you be scared if you don't know that I've killed anyone? Same triumphant look at the judge. Another time he said to the judge, I didn't threaten her. Don't be silly. In my culture, if I had threatened to kill her, she would be dead. In cross-examination, I asked him whether he had seen a document that had been filed about the case in another court. I told him that the court had made it public. The judge confirmed it was a public document. The plaintiff yelled, Are you saying that you have defamed me too? I also said in closing arguments, Your Honor, it is clear in giving evidence that Mr. Plaintiff had some difficulties with English and did not understand certain words. He may have misinterpreted what my client said. He cannot be relied on for this reason alone. Plaintiff stands up and says, My English is fine. How many African languages does Mr. Rocco know? Tell me. I did the trial pro bono. I don't regret it. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. I love you, you squishy